Hello, everybody at Vapor Central in Toronto. Hi, I'm Jodie Emery. I'm Marc Emery's wife and traveling companion on this farewell tour. Of course, it's sad circumstances why we're going to across Canada, different cities on this farewell tour, because Marc is saying goodbye for now. It's not goodbye forever, and hopefully it won't be goodbye for long if you all help out to get him brought back to Canada as soon as possible. It's a packed room here. My God, I don't even think I can see the back. There's so much smoke and vapor in the air. But thank you all for coming. This is an amazing turnout, and Marc and I are having a fantastic time meeting fans and supporters and friends all across Canada. I think this is the 11th city that we're in. Yep, 11 cities in 12 days, so it's been pretty fast-paced. And the circumstances, I'll just give you a short rundown. Marc was fighting extradition, as most of you know, for selling seeds. He never went to the United States, and he wasn't able to get any prison time, or I should say the police and courts weren't willing or able to give him prison time for selling seeds, because why would anyone go to jail for seeds, and why should anybody go to jail for marijuana at all? But Marc was a very mouthy guy. Marc spent lots and lots of money, millions of dollars, trying to end this prohibition, trying to help medical marijuana and hemp and various parts of our culture get accepted in legal environment, and America was not so happy with that. So they made an indictment, and they're trying to bring him down to the United States where he never went, and the threat was facing a punishment of 25 years to life in a federal prison. Now, the reason for that is something called mandatory minimum prison sentences. And in the United States, this has filled their prisons with 1 out of every 100 Americans being behind bars or under the criminal system for drug offenses. And Canada is introducing the same type of legislation which will fill our jails and waste millions of dollars. But Marc was facing this threat on 3 different charges of mandatory minimums, 10 years each, plus a possible $1 million fine for so-called money laundering, which was spending money to help the movement. So, like many people who are facing prison terms of life or long sentences in the United States, he's been kind of forced into taking a plea deal, so he'll be accepting or entering negotiations for a 5-year sentence in the U.S. 5 years is a lot better than life. As you can imagine, I would be heartbroken if I could never see him again. So we want him back. We want him back in Canada as soon as possible. So if you guys can all help out, once he's sent down there, he needs to be brought back to Canada, and we need people writing our federal government, the Conservatives who want him down there. You need to write to them and tell them to bring Marc back to Canada, because once he starts serving time here, he'll get out a lot sooner, whereas in the US, he'll be down there for a very, very long time. So stay tuned to our website, cannabisculture.com. I'll be taking care of it in our store and everything while Marc is away, to be sure that when he comes back, we're on the way to legalization, if not already an end of prohibition across Canada. Without further ado, the man you came to see, Marc Emery.
Thank you very much. Well, it started in this province. You know, I'm native of Ontario. And on one hand, we've come a long way in 20 years. I started activism 20 years ago in this particular field of trying to get cannabis prohibition ended. And 20 years later, there's a lot to show for it. On one hand, back when I started in 1990, all books and magazines in this province, in this country, were illegal about marijuana. In 1987, the federal government, as they're always trying to do, if they get away with it, they will do it. They passed a law that banned all books like High Times magazine, Grow Your Own Stone, every grow guide, all factual books. I found this out one day when I had a radio show at CHRW in London, Ontario. And one of my favorite punk bands was the Dead Kennedys, still is, but a fellow named Jello Biafra was going on tour, and I brought him to Centennial Hall in London, Ontario, because I loved his work, but had not bought his new album that year, which was I Blow Minds for a Living, and in that album he has a segment called Grow More Pot. Now, Jello Biafra is kind of an old fuddy-duddy of a guy, even back then, even though he's on one hand radical. He doesn't smoke marijuana, which I always think is weird. It's weird if you don't smoke marijuana, but he said, grow more pot to save the planet. He was recommending a book by a fellow that I'd never heard of before, and I've never read this book before, but it was called The Emperor Wears No Clothes, and it was by a guy named Jack Herrera, and it is the seminal book of our movement. If you've never read it, get right now to a bookshop and read it, because you know what? I worked 5 years to make that book available here in Canada, so you better go out and read it while you can. There was 8 years in this country when you could not legally buy that book. You could not legally find High Time. You couldn't get any grow guide. A law, and the penalty for that was a $100,000 fine and or 6 months in jail. And that's when I learned what this is all about. Because the fine for possessing marijuana, and by the way, smoking marijuana is not illegal. Possessing marijuana is illegal, and the fine for possessing marijuana in this country is $2,000 and or 6 months in jail. But to tell the truth about marijuana was $100,000 and or 6 months in jail. So that's when I realized the government doesn't really care if you smoke marijuana. It really doesn't even care that you possess marijuana, except it's a way to put its thumb on your face and put its boots on your neck at any given time. What they really care about is the truth we're telling, because as I'm going to tell you tonight, the government is nothing but lies and coercive force over the people of this country. And there is no more evil person that we've ever had in this country than a man named Stephen Harper of the Conservative Party. Your mission while I'm gone is to make sure he doesn't spend another day longer than absolutely possible as Prime Minister. And you know what I know? Most of you here don't even vote. Most of you here do not even vote. Everywhere I'm gone, I'm telling stoners, most of you don't even vote. Hell, I talked to my two brothers last night whose own flesh and blood is heading off to a U.S. prison, and they told me they haven't voted in years. Lots of people don't vote. And I guess it's easy to be cynical when you're in the pot culture, because we're always victimized by government. It doesn't even seem to matter who's in government. We're always victimized. But one thing I do know, if you do not vote, then there's absolutely no chance we're going to have a change in government. Because you know what? Those old people that support prohibition, they get out and vote. That's the only way the Conservative Party got elected. Not a single Conservative got elected from Toronto, Vancouver, or Montreal. All the big cities where everybody like us lives. We didn't vote in large enough numbers to make sure that the opposition overwhelmingly defeated the Conservatives. We've got to tell our friends in rural Canada to get rid of Stephen Harper, because that Bill C-15 that's already passed Parliament and is before the Senate and will be either passed or rejected by the Senate in the next 2 months will send thousands of people from this province and hundreds of people from this city into jail. It mandates a 6 months minimum for people who grow as few as 5 plants and sell them. It mandates a year in jail or 2 years in jail for anybody who sells a little bit of blow or crystal meth. And one thing I do know, the worst thing you can do, and let's face it, I went and spent 3 months in jail for just passing one joint in Saskatoon. So we already can get very outrageous sentences in this country. 3 months in jail for one joint. I was scrubbing toilets for months as the head janitor of the Administration Center of Saskatoon Correctional because I passed a joint to a 22-year-old. The cop didn't even see it. The only thing that was required in court is someone to say, Mr. Emery passed me a joint, and I was put away and taken from my family and wrenched from my home province and put in jail 1,000 miles from home just because I passed a joint. It can already happen here anytime. You know, a lot of people try and tell me, oh, nobody goes to jail for one joint. Nobody goes to jail for marijuana possession. You can get murdered in jail for marijuana possession. Only 2 weeks ago in Houston, Texas, a black woman, she was in jail for marijuana possession, just 4 grams. And her family couldn't afford the bail. And while they were raising the bail, 17 days into being in jail, can you imagine being in jail just 17 days just for 4 grams of weed? While waiting on bail, she was killed. And they don't even know how. They just called up her parents and said, listen, your daughter is here. We need you to come and identify her body as she's now deceased. That's exactly what they said to her. People die in jail for just a few grams of weed. And it even gets more cruel and worse than that. 5 years ago when I was in Saskatoon Correctional for 3 months, for 1 joint, being passed to a consenting adult, not a single complaint from anybody. A young man, 22 years old, named Jonathan Magby, he's a quadriplegic, can only move his neck above. Can only move his head above his neck. You know, a quadriplegic, nothing else moves. Nothing else works. He needed tubes in him to be fed. He had tubes going out of him to go to the washroom. Can't imagine a more crippled up person. And here he is in a car, and the police pull the car over because the driver is going too fast. He's a passenger. And they find him with an ounce of marijuana. He goes to court. I'm not kidding. He goes to court, and the judge lectures him about why marijuana is a bad thing. And she asks him, in order to get a conditional discharge, she said, "You're going to stop smoking marijuana?" He says, "No, I can't stop smoking marijuana. If I stop smoking marijuana, my quality of life ceases to exist, and I would try and kill myself." He said, "I believe in marijuana. It helps me deal with my problems. And no, I can't stop, Your Honor." And she said, "Well, you're not getting the message. So you're going to send you to jail for 10 days for you to think about it." Well, he died on the 5th day. No one knew how to put those tubes in his mouth. No one knew what to do with those tubes. And by the time he went and had toxic shock because he couldn't shit and he couldn't get anything in, like water, they sent him to a hospital and he was already dead. People get killed by our system every month in this country for something as little as marijuana possession. It's ridiculous. It's obscene. And what's it all for? In this country alone, 2 million Canadians since 1965 have been convicted of marijuana. I've been myself arrested 23 times for marijuana. I've been jailed 17 times for marijuana. I've been jailed in 8 out of the 10 provinces, only Prince Edward Island, not for the lack of trying. I smoked out the Charlottetown Police Department, but they just didn't know what to do. Of course, that was on my summer of legalization. You know, I have been jailed 17 times, arrested 23 times. I've even been raided 6 times, but I have been rarely convicted. And you know what? The day I was arrested, the head of the DEA, the head of the U.S. Justice Department, said I was one of the top 50 most wanted in the world. According to the United States. I was in their top 50 most wanted. I'm number 46, in fact. You know what? There's only 45 guys more badass than me in the entire fucking world. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? And I've been a bookseller all my life. And I was reading those books. I was reading Jack Herrera. Top 50 most wanted in the world, and the #1 drug lord in all of Canada, they said. I'm bigger than the Hells Angels. I'm bigger than the Banditos. I'm bigger than every fucking badass in this country. In fact, when I was arrested in 2005, July, the district attorney of Western Washington, he had a big press conference. He had a big map on the wall with all 50 United States, this huge map of the United States. And on it was a marijuana leaf had landed on every one of those states in the map there. And from the top, you know, in that vague northern spot some Americans know as Canada, there was a line, like 3 or 4 arrows coming down from Vancouver. And it was like, and Jeff Sullivan, the DA, was saying, Marc Emery had tentacles in all 50 states. Tentacles in all 50 states. It's like I'm the Viet Cong and it's a Ho Chi Minh trail of seeds going down in there. Can't. So you would normally think, what the hell did you do to get that? I'll tell you what I do. I sold seeds. I sold millions of seeds, but that wasn't really my crime. My crime was the whole idea. It was called overgrowing the government. And in 1990, after I realized, holy crap, they can even ban books and magazines that tell the truth. They can put people in jail. We've got to have a revolution. And to run a revolution, you need lots of money. And I thought, well, if I sell these seeds and get out there and millions of plants emerge from these seeds, then we're going to have weed everywhere. Great weed, good weed, different kinds of weed. People will be able to grow in their backyard instead of having to buy weed in the inner cities. The medical people. I actually gave over 500 people with medical cards across Canada and the United States free seeds just so they would never have to go to the inner cities. They could grow their own weed, and it'd be great weed, and we'd have good pot everywhere. And the idea would be even if the government threw 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 50,000, 100,000 people at it, we would still overgrow them. We would still grow more weed than they could destroy. And that was my idea, that one man with a vision, one man with determination could eliminate and neutralize the work of 20, 30, 40,000, 50,000 evil people bent on destruction of a plant and the people who loved that plant. And that was a brilliant strategy, and it is working awesome. So I sold all these seeds, and then people would send me money. And you know what? I even charged more than other people deliberately because I needed that money. We had huge plans. You know, I gave away $4.5 million from 1994 to 2005. $4.5 million. We paid for the Canadian Supreme Court challenge in 2003 that cost $85,000. I paid for the Global Marijuana March's entire promotion every year from 1997 to 2005. That was $40,000 a year. I opened a drug addiction clinic in Vancouver called the Iboga Therapy House, a brilliant revolutionary way of treating drug addicts. Eliminates drug withdrawal and drug craving immediately. And it was $250,000. I learned a lot about that. I want to talk about that sometime too. But for now, I spent that money on class action suits. I subsidized political parties in Israel, in New Zealand, in Australia, and all the Canadian provinces in the United States to get these government. The idea was we would sell those seeds. People would grow weed everywhere. They would overgrow the government, and then I'd use their money to subvert the drug war, get a whole bunch of activists like Marijuana Policy Project started, and I'm the original financer of the Marijuana Policy Project, and now they're so big, they're doing great stuff all over the Americas, but without my seed money, they would never have gotten off the ground. Just think of that. That's just one of many, many things that the money people sent to me went to, and the DEA noticed. They noticed, because you know what? Not a single other seed seller is being extradited. They're not even considered for extradition. They just keep the money. Very few of these seed companies, hundreds of them in this country, operating in stores and mail order and advertising in high times. None of them are even in any danger of even ever being approached by DEA. What is it I did that was so wrong? You know, that when Jeff Sullivan was pushing that map and making it look like I was on the Ho Chi Minh Trail there, he said I was the most significant threat to the United States from Canada. The most significant threat. You know, I'm sure I'm not any significant threat to the people of the United States because they're the people that all wanted my seats. Hundreds of thousands of them. Hundreds of thousands of peaceful Americans trying to grow a little bit of weed, and their own government hates them so much they put them in jail for years and years. I'm not at war with the people of the United States. The people of the United States love me and I love them. It's the government of the United States and the government of Canada is pure evil. Pure evil. And it's up to us to do something about it. And I'm going to give you some inspiration and some hope and some ideas and some methods of which we can get this achieved. Because when I get out of jail, after my 5-year term in the United States, and hopefully less if you get me back here, but when I get out, fuck pot better be legal or I'm going to be pissed off with you. I'm going to be pissed off with you because I've been at this for 20 years. 20 years I've been making it so you can have a place like Vapor Central. Listen, I'm not going to front. I've been doing a lot of activism in this country, and people who operate these wonderful places like Vapor Central and all the places that Dom Kramer has in this city that are beautiful. Dom Kramer says he was inspired by my example when I opened my first shop and we started this radical retail revolution. Everywhere you can go in this country, people who have emulated my example and have taken up my example, well, we've made progress. We got books and literature. In fact, myself, a man named Alan Young, one of the greatest lawyers this country's ever had, and Umberto Arafito, who is in charge of normal time, we overturned that drug literature ban. I financed many of the cases that help make medical marijuana accessible, and now it's legal. We've made lots of progress in this country. We've got legal medical marijuana, even though the evil conservative government's always trying to thwart it, always trying to put our people in jail anyway, like Matt Murnaugh and other people should never see a day of jail, never see an hour of jail for their use of marijuana. It's criminal what the governments are doing to us. But nonetheless, we got industrial hemp legal. We got medical marijuana legal. We got books and magazines about weed. So now it's just one last final hurdle to get marijuana legal. And what is it about this marijuana prohibition that makes it go on and on? We've had 45 years of marijuana prohibition in this country. 45 years, 3 generations. Since 1965, 2 million Canadians. You know what? And of those 2 million Canadians, 400,000 of them went to jail for significant periods of time. And what exactly was the benefit to this country? I ask these prohibitionists all the time, what is the benefit? What did the country get? You know, it costs $50,000 to $75,000 to incarcerate a Canadian person for a year in a jail. It costs less to send him to the best university in this country. It costs less to send him to the best university in this country when we spend $50,000 to $70,000 a year jailing up Pot people. There's 2,000 pot people in jail right now all across this country at any given time. There's 70,000 in the United States at any given time. And there's 250,000 people in jails worldwide just for pot at any given time. It's the biggest number of people in jail for any particular offense anywhere. And when you take it all into account, there's more of us in jail than everybody. It's unbelievable. What did we do? What did the public gain by this 45-year-long pogrom? Where's the benefit? I've never even heard a parliamentarian say there's a benefit to it. All they keep saying is legalization. It sends the wrong message. The wrong message to who? The people you're always jailing? That we live in a free society, a democratic society, at least we're supposed to be? What did we get for all that? You know, prohibition produces horrible, horrible things. I mean, it's not like we stopped smoking marijuana. You know, when this law was passed in 1923 to make marijuana illegal, there's not a single known reference of a single Canadian ever having smoked it. So whereas we didn't have a marijuana law, no one was smoking it. And then when they made marijuana illegal, now we got 7 million Canadians smoking pot. Up to about 23% of all Canadians are smoking pot. Prohibition of marijuana creates gang violence. You know, we've got 19 murders in Vancouver this year alone from gangs. And you know what? If we'd have ended prohibition on January 1st of this year, there'd be zero. Not a single murder amongst decent civilians. Gangsters are killing people on the street, 19 of them. And why? Because they're lured into this business. They're supplying the drugs. The money's fantastic. The government knows this. They saw the example with alcohol, prohibition, how it made gangs everywhere, guns flying on the street, people fighting, turf wars. That's what prohibition will give you. And you know, people, with mandatory minimums, the worst thing you can do is send a young man to jail. Instead of dealing a little bit of blow or dealing a little bit of crystal meth. Sure, I don't have to approve of crystal meth or blow, but one thing I do know is you send that kid to jail for a mandatory 1 year or 2 year, then he's going to be there and vulnerable, and gangs run the prisons of this country, and by the time he gets out, he'll have been pressured into joining a gang, and when he gets out, he's going to be acting for that gang, and we're going to be manufacturing thousands and thousands of new criminals with a tendency to violence. All because of one law, all because of prohibition of marijuana. What does it accomplish for this country? Nothing good at all. Why is it a policy? Well, I'll tell you why. But first, let me tell you how good you guys are. Let me tell you that the marijuana people are the greatest culture on this earth. You know, because for one thing, we're easily the most tolerant. You know, people can say they tolerate gays or tolerate people of color or tolerate the people who are different from them, but we're the real tolerant people. Because you know what? We've been getting our ass kicked for 45 years every fucking day, and we still take it and never fight back. We don't. I've never read a single press release of anybody who shot back at a cop who was coming through their front door with a fucking Kevlar jacket on, a truncheon, pepper spray, guns drawn, screaming their heads off, killing your dogs, threatening your kids, making them horrified. These cops are all coming through it because you're growing a few marijuana plants. I have never seen any pot person fight back to these Nazis who come doing this over and over again in every village, hamlet, city in this whole country. Never seen it. Most tolerant people ever. But here's the thing. Every single great thing you can point to today that we love and use, that we listen to, that we experience was done by a pot people. It was done by the pot people. The pot people have given us everything. All the best stuff you can name. William Shakespeare, the greatest writer in the English language, was a pothead. I've talked to the scientist who tested his pipes when I was writing an article, and they said 2 pipes traced for hashish absolutely and without question. Do you ever hear that William Shakespeare, the greatest writer of the English language, was a pothead? No, you don't. And why is that? The greatest athlete of all time. A man who's got more gold medals than the entire Canadian Olympic team for any given medal. A man who's got 16 gold medals and 2 bronze ones. He probably uses those as doilies for his drink. They're fucking bronze medals. Who gives a It's Michael Phelps, a man who needs to breathe to be brilliant. A man who needs to breathe to be brilliant is a pothead taking bong hits, and I'll tell you what he knows. Because, you know, people think, oh, gee, he can't do that. It'll hurt his lungs. It's like cigarette smoke. No, it isn't. We're going to talk about things like cigarettes, but cigarettes are nicotine, and nicotine, when it goes in, you don't even have to burn it. You can chew it, too. You look at these young ball players, and they're chewing tobacco, and they're getting cancer of the tongue and cancer of the esophagus and big holes in the side of their mouth, because nicotine is a vasoconstrictor, and it tightens up your arteries. And little bits of blood and oxygen get through, and not enough. So you start getting cancer, and cells die because it's like a little tiny thread there, your arteries. Well, pot works totally different. When that Michael Phelps was doing his famous bong hit, And some little narky friend sold that picture of him. But when he did that bong hit, he knows something. This is a man who uses his lungs more than any other organ in his body, and he knows what I know, and that when you take a big bong hit, you can take 6, 7, 8 times more oxygen in those lungs, and none of that. Normally, if you weren't smoking pot and just took a big breath, you'd exhale all that oxygen, because your lungs wouldn't be able to use any more than normal. But when you take a THC-laden bong hit, and the THC hits your lung lining, it opens up because it's a vasodilator, so it makes your arteries and veins bigger than normal, so they're able to carry more oxygen and more blood to affected tissues. And then, while that's opening it all up for that oxygen, all that extra oxygen is there to be delivered. So you're getting, every time you do a bong hit, you're getting way more oxygen. You're making your lungs really healthy. And then the THC goes and scrapes the lung lining and shrinks tumors. THC actually shrinks tumors. And we've got, everything I'm telling you tonight is absolutely true, and you can verify it by Googling anything I tell you. I welcome any challenge to what I say tonight. Not a single thing I'm telling you I can't corroborate with a lot of footnotes. Michael Phelps knows that oxygen he's taking is going in, and that THC is shrinking tumors and keeping his body healthy, keeping his lungs healthy. The greatest athlete of the modern era, the most successful Olympian in the history of our Olympics on this planet, is a big pothead. Big pothead. Greatest writer in English. So I'm thinking, we should talk to these prohibitionists sometimes and say, well, how do you feel about knowing that all the basic canons of English literature, William Shakespeare, the Bible itself, telling everyone to take these seeds and make good use of them because they are all good in Genesis 1:29. Who the fuck is Stephen Harper to say that he's superior to the Bible? Who's Stephen Harper to say that he can cast asunder what the Bible clearly says that we all have to do? Who's the government to say Michael Phelps, the greatest modern athlete who uses his lungs specifically to win those medals, is wrong? William Shakespeare is wrong. Everything great in our society today was done by a pothead. If we weren't for potheads, not a single one of you would have an iPod here. Not a single one of you would have an iPhone here. Because Steve Jobs was a total utter pothead when he developed the Mac computer. So there's no Mac computer for you, no iPod for you. In fact, we should go to these prohibitions. Give me that fucking iPod, you ingrate. Give me that thing. You don't deserve it. You'd have Stephen Jobs put in jail if you saw him smoking a joint. You wouldn't even recognize him as the guy who makes it possible for you to have 10,000 songs and something the size of a credit card. Boy, when I was younger, 10,000 songs, I'd need a barge pulled down the river with that much vinyl to have 10,000 songs. Some pothead made life so beautiful for everybody on this planet, you can walk around with the entire pantheon of Western civilization's music and never pay for it and have it in something the size of a credit card. We're getting so decadently spoiled, sitting here listening to our music, not getting out and being active. And another thing, too, Bill Gates and Paul Allen, the founders of Microsoft, were even more stoned than Stephen Jobs was when they developed. And Paul Allen is still stoned. Paul Allen he spent $55 million on the Jimi Hendrix Experience in Seattle. That is the work of a stoner right there. Come on. $55 million so I can have a big glass guitar going up the side of a building. That's a stoner for sure. Paul Allen is still a stoner, and Stephen Jobs is still a stoner, and Bill Gates, well, we don't know about him. But he was a stoner when he came up with all his great ideas, and now he hires stoners to come up with all his great ideas. Every Microsoft operating system, Mac, Apple operating system, iPods, iPhones, William Shakespeare, the Bible, telling you to take this pot, use it. Look what the great example they did. We don't even have to stop there. Look at what's in your iPod. Paul McCartney, the Beatles, they have 32 songs alone that reference marijuana, and one song, Got to Get You Into My Life, is all about marijuana. That's a whole song Paul McCartney wrote for marijuana. I got to get more weed in my life. And once the greatest poet of the modern era, Bob Dylan, got high with him, because Bob Dylan introduced the Beatles to weed, they became the greatest pop group of all time. Paul McCartney he's 66 today. That guy smokes a big bomber every day. He's been arrested 3 times. He's just like us. He's one of us. And that guy he looks 36, not 66. George Harrison, he stopped smoking weed in the 90s, in the early 90s, and then he died of cancer because he was smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day. George Harrison died at age 58 of lung cancer, smoking cigarettes, and Paul McCartney is still performing in massive concerts at age 66. In fact, he had a first song was this really ripping version of You Can Drive My Car. He just sang in Halifax 4 days ago. And I bet he had a big bomber just before he went on stage. Without question. The greatest pop band of all time are Potheads. Your people. This is your legacy. And Led Zeppelin, the greatest hard rock band of all time, all Potheads. Robert Plant's first known picture is him in 1967 holding a sign up at a rally saying legalize pot. I've got that picture. He looks amazing. Beautiful blonde hair. He's got that mod clothes. Legalize pot. Indeed. Led Zeppelin and Rolling Stones. Total potheads, all of them, right now. And I can know this for a fact because when they came to town to perform, the daughters, Theodore Richards of Keith Richards and Lizzie Jagger of Mick Jagger came into my store and hung out with me for a number of hours and bought a whole bunch of old prints because they told me each one of their dads has a castle. And in that castle, they got one big room all dedicated to weed. Just one big room all dedicated to weed. So the daughters, when they're on tour, they go and buy old hookahs and old bongs and old pipes and prints on the wall so they can decorate this big room in their castle. Each one has all about weed. The Rolling Stones, the Beatles, and Led Zeppelin, the top 3 pop bands, rock bands of all time, total potheads. And what I say to these people, to you and the prohibitionists, is you hypocrite. What if you never had those people smoke pot? What if you never had the benefit of their inspiration? Can you imagine this world without the Beatles, without Rolling Stones, without Led Zeppelin? I know I can't. But go further, without Bob Marley, the symbol of liberation to more oppressed people on this planet. There's no one other than Bob Marley. Bob Marley's instantly recognized to oppress people everywhere on earth. And every ounce of his songs was inspired by huge spliffs. He was known to smoke 1 pound in a week. 1 pound in a week. And you know what? Don't let him ever tell you that smoking pot's bad for your kids. You know what? Because his women, he had 13 kids by 10 women, and every one of those kids is a musical genius. Everyone's a musical genius. He smoked so much weed, 1 pound a day, and every woman he was with smoked during pregnancy and afterwards, and every one of his kids is a musical genius. Bob Marley, the Beatles, Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, don't stop there. Every single worthwhile piece of music you ever owned and will own is by potheads. Look at all your hip-hop music. Every last one of those hip-hop artists are potheads. And look at your reggae music. Come on, all potheads. And look at the jazz. Jazz music is the music of reefer. Jazz music was developed in the 1920s under the influence of marijuana, nothing else. All the black people along the Mississippi Delta, New Orleans and St. Louis and Chicago in the north and places west and east started this strange new music with a different beat because they were inspired by this new herb that was coming up from Mexico called marijuana. Marijuana made jazz music what it is, but that's also how marijuana got illegal in the United States and why it's illegal originally in 1923 in Canada. Because the black man was finally, in a little tiny way, a little bit equal in the 1920s. You know, before 1966, let me tell you this, no black person and white person could even be in the same room without one being a slave or a servant to the other. It took till the mid-60s, because black people had separate washrooms, separate restaurants, separate cars on a train, separate hotels. You could not even live in the same neighborhood as white people. All black people had to live in their own neighborhood, right up to the 1960s. Everything was segregated in America. You couldn't go anywhere without, if you were a black man, you had to go to black man everything. Stores, black man barbershops, black man bathrooms, black restaurants. But in the 1920s, no white people could play that voodoo music very well, so they hired black people, these new jazz bands coming to play. And for the first time ever, white people could see these black people, and there was this modicum of equality in the room, finally and at last, for this jazz music. But what happens is, well, you know how women are in music. Heck, you can see all these festivals out here. Somebody just has to play a bongo, and there's 20 women swaying around that bongo in 5 minutes. Well, imagine what happens when these young, white, impressionable women see this amazing music, and these handsome black men in these nice suits, articulate and elegant and creative and looking awesome. For the first time ever, they were able to see this forbidden fruit, this hidden legacy of America, these studly men who, after all, were bred to be super huge, super big, super powerful slaves on plantations for 300 years. Well, once those women started seeing those men, there were pregnancies, black babies on white girls, and there is nothing that was more threatening, and may still be more threatening, to white middle-class parents than the thought of a big black mandingo cock inside their lily white daughter. And that had to stop right away. They chased those jazz musicians out of towns in many cities, including Seattle and Chicago. They lynched some of those jazz musicians for having sex with their white daughters. And as they blamed it on that jazz music, and most importantly on that reefer. That reefer was starting it all. Yep. But all jazz music is weed music. All reggae music's weed music. All hip-hop music's weed. All rock and roll of any note. Green Day, anybody you can care to name, did so under the inspiration of marijuana. But don't stop there. People say, well, at least there's country music. Country music's still clean, isn't it? No. Willie Nelson, Waylon Jennings, Hank Williams Jr., Hank Williams III, potheads. Even Toby Keith, that redneck, is a pothead. He wrote a song called Smokin' Weed with Willie. It's a great song. You should listen to it. Everything musically that was ever any damn good was by a pothead. Oh, why stop there? Look at media science, Stephen Jobs, Bill Gates, well, even Ted Turner, founder of the cutting-edge CNN that we all take for granted now, that guy smokes a big bomber every day and did so when he developed CNN. Moses Neimer, right here in Toronto, who developed much music and city TV, smokes a big, huge honker every day and is having a good time doing it and having good health. Because one thing I do know, you're going to stay in really good health if you smoke a lot of weed. You're never going to get Alzheimer's disease, ever, as long as you smoke at least one joint every day after the age of 52. And that's pertinent to me, because my mom died last year from Alzheimer's, and she refused to smoke marijuana, because from the Depression era time she came from, doctors didn't tell people to smoke marijuana. If a doctor didn't tell her to take it, then she wasn't going to do it. I have 10 studies to show you that Alzheimer's can be stopped by marijuana, and there's not a single known example of people who smoke pot like me for 30 years, or even other people I know for 40 years, who ever got any trace of Alzheimer's disease. Not a one. And as long as you're just smoking weed, you're never going to get lung cancer or cancers of the respiratory system, because as I explained to you, THC attacks cancers. It keeps your lungs clean, keeps them healthy, keeps them full of blood and oxygen, which is the life of the body, blood and oxygen. You're going to stay so healthy. I meet people all the time with multiple sclerosis who tell me that without that, life would simply not be worth living. With MS and smoking weed, they can get their eyesight back, they can get their movement of their limbs back. Life is worth living. I meet people all the time who have spasticity problems, epilepsy, tell me they couldn't get through the day without marijuana. People always getting prescribed all this morphine, all these drugs. And sometimes they can replace all those drugs with marijuana, but even when they can't, they have to smoke weed just to keep their stomach down, just to keep the food down. Anybody who's ever had cancer, chemotherapy knows that weed's the only thing that allows you to eat and keep food down. And so on it goes. Hundreds and hundreds of ailments, most things with long names I've never even heard of. People coming up to me and saying, man, thank you so much for telling the truth, because I simply wouldn't want to live. I couldn't do it. I couldn't, they're in wheelchairs, they're all crippled up. I mean, I'm a lucky guy. I consider my use of cannabis therapeutic, because people say it's medical. Well, you know what? If you don't eat oranges, if you don't eat vitamin C, you're going to die. But nobody says I'm eating oranges for medical reasons, right? So I think all marijuana use is therapeutic, because that's why we eat oranges. It's for therapeutic. I need the vitamins or else I'll get scurvy, and then I'll die. So, we don't say we eat oranges for medical reasons, but you can say you'd eat oranges for therapeutic reasons, and that's what all of us are doing with marijuana. Every single one of us here has a profound experience on how marijuana has affected us positively. So why do we go to jail? Why do we go to jail? I'm going to ask you that question, because you're going to think about that while I keep talking, because we're not finished. Marijuana people are not only the greatest people on the cutting edge of computer technology. Every video game you've ever played was by a pothead. Every one of them. Bill Gates, Stephen Jobs, Ted Turner, Moses Neimer. What about athletes? What about guys like Michael Phelps, the greatest athlete in the world, smoking pot? What about every black player in the NBA trying to smoke weed? Used to smoke weed, always smoke weed, now they're in the NBA. And can you imagine guys making $10-15 million a year being told you can't smoke weed anymore, when they can finally afford fucking bagfuls with that kind of money? Can't be told to not smoke weed. Carmelo Anthony, charged only a couple of months ago with having weed. It's a humiliating thing to be so great and to be told by petty people that you're going to go to jail or you have to give up 50 games pay or something because you smoked a little weed. Consider what the alternative is. Alcohol. Athletes use weed. You know, Rob Van Dam has won 6 championship belts as a wrestler. I know what you're thinking. It is semi-scripted. They do kind of anticipate what happens, but he's broken about 15 bones and limbs. He's torn things. I looked at all the scars on his body, and he said weed is the only thing it got him to win championships. He said, when I smoked marijuana, Mark, I could focus on the fight. I could see myself winning. I visualized myself winning. I could get in the zone with marijuana. And additionally, he said, it always concealed and helped me deal with the pain of injuries that I was always getting. I got pictures of Rob Van Dam jumping 24 feet down, bouncing on top of some guy. He said, oftentimes those things go wrong, and you break legs, and you break ankles, and you break shoulders. So you need that. He said every single wrestler ever gone into the ring smokes marijuana or he's not going back a second time. Powerlifters, Olympic power, the last 2 powerlifters who won silver and bronze medals for Japan got stripped of their medals because they tested positive for pot in the last Olympics. Ross Rebliati, snowboarder from Canada. I've smoked with him twice. So I don't know whether it was secondhand smoke, as he said in 1998, but I know the man has firsthand experience with pot smoke. He smokes, skateboarders smoke, snowboarders smoke. I don't know any hockey players that smoke, I gotta tell you. Good to hear it. Because basketball players smoke. The entire 2002 New York Mets were all stoned on pot that entire season. I don't usually boast about that though, because one of the things I like to tell you is that marijuana people are responsible for all the most beautiful cutting edge things in our life. Now the 2002 Mets sucked. They didn't do very well at all. But just so you know, it permeates every kind of athleticism. The man in charge of Canada's space program, Jamie Matthews, the MOST project. It's called Molecular Oscillation of Stars Telescope. It's called the Hubble Telescope because it costs so much less than the American one, which is the Hubble Telescope. And this telescope project is our Canadians, and the mission scientist is Jamie Matthews, and that guy is a total hashhead and smoked many times with me. Even Pierre Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, for better or worse, depending on how you feel, smoked hashish. And his son has smoked with me 4 or 5 times, so it really pisses me off when I see Justin Trudeau, who took big gaggers with me, is in Parliament actually voting for Bill C-15. What a fucking hypocrite. What a guy. And I know, unfathomable, unthinkable. And that's what you call being whipped. When you can be made to go against what you know, what your own. I mean, we've got a fellow named Scott Reid, who's a member of Parliament for Hastings. It's a Conservative Party. His wife told me herself she smoked medical marijuana when she was getting cancer treatment. And it did tremendous things for her. Got her through cancer chemotherapy. Her own husband abstained on the vote for Bill C-15. Couldn't even get the courage to vote against it when his wife used medical marijuana in hospital. The hypocrisy is everywhere. Marijuana is so good and does so much for so many. 7 million Canadians use it at least once a year, and a lot of us are totally chronic. It's brought us everything from music, from technology to cutting news service, major athletes, every form of entertainment and science and architecture, beautiful music. You know, the most popular thing in all of the earth, the one activity, the one thing people like more than anything else, that more people say they like, is music. There is nothing more universal than our love of music. Every one of us got a song in our heart. If we don't have hundreds of songs in our heart, if we don't even have thousands of songs in our iPod, every single person knows songs from when they were taught. They've taught other people to sing songs. We're sharing music all the time. There's nothing we do more intellectually or leisurely than play music, and every single goddamn form of music that's any damn good was brought to us by pot inspiration. So what is it? Greatest writer in the in the English language for 500, William Shakespeare smokes pot. Greatest musicians ever brought onto a recorded disc smoke pot. All the greatest athletes in the world smoke pot. Overachievers like Moses Neimer and Ted Turner. Even Carl Sagan developed every last one of his 7 accepted scientific theories after smoking a big bomber, walking into the shower, turning on the hot water, steaming it all up, and writing all his formulas on the glass windows of his shower. That's how he developed every one of his shows. And that's how he thought of the TV series and book Cosmos, which is probably the greatest, science show of the entire 1980s and 90s. Oh, pothead. Carl Sagan. And so on it goes. So what is the deal with a prohibition that's criminalized 2 million of? In fact, since 1965, 28 million people around the world have been charged with weed offenses, and 6 million of those people went to jail for some length of time. I mean, we're talking a pogrom, a bigotry, a hatred on a grander scale than anything known. And you can even substitute the word pothead for Jew and go back to the time before they were put in the concentration camps. In the 1930s, when Jews were told in Germany, you can't work at this university anymore. You can't send your kids to the school anymore. You're not allowed to have a business anymore. You can't live with the Aryan people anymore. Just substitute the word pothead for Jew. Because you know what? They can take away your kids for having a few plants in your home. They can take away your house. If you rape somebody or even murder somebody, they don't even take your house. Isn't that weird to you? You can kill someone, you won't lose your house, but you grow 25 plants and you can lose your house. You can lose your kids. You go over the border with just as little as a joint in your car and you can lose your car. $20,000 just forfeited like that because you have a joint. There's nothing else you could do to get punished like that. We get fired from our jobs. We get urine tested. You get a conviction for just a tiny gram of pot. I mean, we talked about you going to be murdered in jail for a tiny couple of grams of pot, but any one of you that gets a conviction is not going to the United States anymore for the foreseeable future. You cannot go to a U.S. university. You will not be a banker. You cannot be a teacher. You cannot get bonded. You won't even be a trucker because truckers have to be able to go to the United States. There's a whole lot of jobs you'll never get once you've got a pot conviction. And yet your heritage is the greatest plant ever put on this earth to give people incredible inspiration. Incredible inspiration. I want them to. It's just mind-boggling though. We do so much, and pot's illegal. We're punished like no other group on earth is punished, in numbers like no other group on earth is punished, because we belong to the greatest society of people, of achievers, of brilliant artists, of thinkers, of movies. So many Hollywood actors and actresses are smoking pot all the time. Jack Nicholson, Charlize Theron, even Brad Pitt's chronic and smokes every day. One day, when he finished working on a movie set in Los Angeles, he gave every single person on that set a bong as a gift, because I know the person who sold him all his bongs. I got pictures of Brad Pitt with a big cannabis leaf on. Brad Pitt, one of the most famous actors, is a pothead. And so on it always goes. Most Canadian musicians, from the Tragically Hip to the Guess Who to anybody you can name who is any damn good who ever came out of this country musically, is a pothead. What, then, is the reason for this prohibition of marijuana? How did such a thing happen? And look what else is out there. Everything that's legal is going to kill you, is deceptively delivered to you as lies, lies, lies. Everything to do with the society they've given us is lies. Look at alcohol. Alcohol is totally legal. It's promoted on our national sport every time. Right after a car ad, they put a beer ad, put a liquor ad. You know, you can look under your kitchen sink right now, and on that bottle of Drano is a skull and crossbones saying it's poison, don't drink. Well, who the fuck is drinking Drano? Nobody's drinking Drano. If you're 2 years old and you get a Drano, you can't understand what that skull and bones means anyway. No one's drinking Drano. I have not read in a newspaper that anyone's drinking Drano for 10 years. But you can buy a bottle of Jack Daniels, which will kill every man, woman, and person in this room. Within 24 hours, you drink a bottle of 40 ounces of Jack Daniels, and you're a dead man. There's not even a warning on that bottle that'll kill you. And you're supposed to drink it. It's meant to be consumed, and not a single warning. No skull and crossbones on that Jack Daniels. What is up with that? Pot doesn't kill you, and we're hunted down like dogs, hunted like animals. Do every kind of wretched punishment to us that's possible that doesn't even happen to murderers and rapists. Jack Daniels doesn't even have a warning on it. And tobacco, what's that all about? Nothing but killing. 40,000 Canadians every year die from tobacco. It's got no other function than to kill you on the installment plan. Alcohol. You know, alcohol's so bad that every last one of you women in here, every woman 20 or over, has had sex with someone they shouldn't have had after alcohol. Most unwanted pregnancies in the world are from people who drink alcohol and forget what the hell they're doing. Alcohol will change your moral code. Every man in here over 20 is giving some woman alcohol so he could fuck her when she wouldn't have thought about it at all. Alcohol will make you change your moral standards and become a rotten person with terrible judgment, hostile. Most domestic violence at home is about alcohol. Most bank robberies even involve alcohol. Violence of every kind. The use of guns is usually accompanied with alcohol. And alcohol is legal everywhere, and the government's making a lot of money, and it can be advertised anywhere. But pot doesn't hurt anybody, and you know what? Pot will never, ever have you do anything you wouldn't normally do. Pot does not change your moral code. Pot makes you think about what other people are thinking. Pot makes you put yourself in other people's shoes so you can get a sense of empathy. You know what that man is thinking. You know where he's been. You can understand how the suffering of others impacts on our world. You're not going to seduce someone and lie to them and get them stoned and then seduce them. Never happens. Pot will never make you change your moral standards or the way you live, except improve it. Cocaine make people do horrible, desperate, immoral things. But pot will never change your moral standards. It's that good. And that's why, in fact, pot will only allow you to do the things you would have normally done and just enjoy them more and do them better. Pot will make you enjoy things more and do them better. That's why when you smoke pot, you can be a better driver than straight people by far. You'll be a better parent by far. You'll be a better lover by far. You'll be a better businessman by far and a better friend by far. Because after all, what goes on? I mean, I've already talked about how pot will never let you get Alzheimer's disease. You'll never get cancer of the lungs and respiratory system. You've got multiple sclerosis, AIDS wasting syndrome, epilepsy, hell, Crohn's disease. Pot's going to be good for you. There's nothing else like it on the planet. You know, half this tour I've been wearing hemp pants. You can wear this plant around you. You can eat this plant. You go into stores around here, there's hemp cereal flakes in all these grocery stores. Hemp hearts, hemp cheeses. I've seen hemp products, and they're made right here in Canada. Made right here in Canada. All that weed, all that hemp. And where does you know, in Jesus, by the way, I was going to get to him last, but Jesus wore cannabis, okay? So not only is William Shakespeare a pothead, but Jesus was a pothead too, all right? Jesus walked around the middle in Palestine 2,000 years ago. There was no cotton. Nobody had fresh-pressed cotton, easy-to-breathe clothes. Because that started in the 1770s when they developed the cotton gin, Eli Whitney's famous cotton. Because cotton is a very short fiber. And up till then, cotton was used to make book pages. That's why books from the 1600s stay real brilliant white and fresh, because they're made from cotton, not tree pulp, which is a great use for cotton. They make great books. But they couldn't be made into clothes because that fiber could not be strung together until they invented a very interesting little machine called the cotton gin, which puts short fibers together and makes them so you can buy cotton now on a long threaded spool. But before 1700, not happening. Everybody in the ancient times wore canaf, sisal, jute, hemp, and flax. All clothes were made of that. All the, you know, there's 10,000 planes going up in the air every day around the world, taking people around. It's certainly been taking me around. But you know what? 200-300 years ago, there were no planes. I don't know how good your schooling is, so I thought I would tell you that. There were no planes 200 or 300 years ago. There were just big, massive wooden ships. And on those, every one of those wooden ships, and we're talking 30 to 40,000 ships at sea every day in the 15, 16, 1700s, bringing people over to Canada, the pioneers. And those ships were made of cannabis sativa hemp. And those sails are huge. There's over 150 square feet of canvas, which comes from the word cannabis. There's 150 square feet in just one sail, and several ships have 8 to 10 sails on them. And they needed acres and acres and acres of hemp, cannabis sativa, to be grown so those sails could be replaced every 6-9 months. Because out at sea with these strong, freezing cold winds and salt water, the hemp would eventually rip and tear and need to be replaced. When you look at any old ship, it has an anchor bigger than me, weighing up to 1,000 pounds, and it's held together by 4-inch rope, and that rope was exclusively and only made by cannabis sativa for hundreds and hundreds of years. You don't even know that Napoleon invaded Russia in 1812 because he needed all their hemp fields. You don't get taught that. Why the hell would Napoleon go crazy and invade Russia and try and reach Moscow? He wasn't a crazy man, but he was being blockaded by the British, and he needed to re-rig his ships, and he couldn't get any hemp from the New World because the British had cut him off, and they'd also cut him off from the Black Sea hemp coming in from the Ukraine. So we had to invade Russia to get that hemp, and he failed. An entire empire, an armada, was brought down because of his lust for hemp, and it couldn't be achieved. Hemp has changed the way history is meant. The Declaration of Independence is published on hemp, and not only that, get this, I'm going to jail for 5 years. It could have been 25 or 50. They say I'm the greatest marijuana producer ever in the history of the U.S. criminal justice system. The DEA said on Lou Dobbs, I'm responsible for 1.1 million pounds of marijuana worth $3 billion. I can't even imagine $3 billion. I think in my wallet, I got like $300, maybe even less. So I'm just thinking $3 billion must be my wallet times about 10,000. 10,000 in my wallet stacked up as far as the eye can see, that much money. $3 billion they said I'm responsible for. That's the kind of thing. I'm the #1 drug lord in all of Canada, top 50 most wanted in the world. And you know what? There's only one man really ever grew more weed than me, but he was never brought before the U.S. criminal justice system. It's founding father George Washington. He was the wealthiest landowner in America. And from 1762 to 1789, he had 3,000 acres of weed under cultivation at any given time, up to 12 different varieties. He had hundreds of slaves working on that weed day in and day out. George Washington, the founding father of the United States, was the biggest pot farmer in the history of North America. And I'm going to jail for 5 years because I sold seeds. What the hell is up with that? How could we have gone from one end of history to the other in such a time when we have all the evidence in the modern era, through all our media, through the internet? Everyone knows that marijuana is the greatest plant ever put on this earth. And we live with this filthy hypocrisy that allows the governments of the world to put us in jail like we're the worst scourge ever put on this earth, like we're some kind of cancer. And yet all we've ever done is give people great things. It's terrible. Alcohol and tobacco, they're legal and they'll kill you. Prescription drugs given out to you by doctors, gods in our society. Highest paid profession in Canada are doctors. And yet thousands of people die in this country every year from prescriptions gone wrong. People getting antidepressants are killing themselves, hanging themselves. People getting off antidepressants are killing themselves. People getting Vioxx and all these other heart medications and mental things and things to scramble your brains that are terrible and toxic. You just have to look on the ads on CNN about all these drugs they're trying to prescribe to you and all their side effects. And the side effects are all 10 times worse than any benefit you might get. Prescription drug, not a single person, not a single doctor is being called to court to account for all the people they kill with these prescription drugs. Not a J.R. McDonald, tobacco's president's never been to court to account for the murders he commits every year. 40,000 people deliberately, willfully killed for money. That's all. He could just say, hey, it's not worth killing 40,000 a year for a paycheck like $1 million, like I get $1.2 million every year. Oh, I shouldn't be taking that money. That's blood money. That comes from the pockets of families who will never have someone as their husband or their father or their children again because I killed them. Never been brought before a court. The president of Molson Breweries in this city's never been brought to court to account for the thousands of people he kills knowingly with his death-dealing products. Nobody's called to account in this country. Hell, peanuts will kill you. 120 people die every year in North America from peanuts. I never saw a peanut farmer brought to court. Sesame seeds kill 25 people every year. The biggest killer, even bigger than tobacco. Tobacco used to be the #1 killer, but now it's sugar. Sugar is kicking our ass more than anything else on earth. And you know why? Because for 50,000 years, we evolved without eating sugar. We used to get our sugars from fruit or fruit juices or starches like potatoes or stuff like that. That's got all the sugar and carbs you ever need. But instead, we're swilling down tons and tons of fructose, sucrose in everything we drink. Except all the water, because you're smarter people, of course. Don't have that crap. But for 4 or 5 generations now, we've been flooding our little tiny pancreas with all this fructose, sucrose. It's like toxic sludge moving down there that only pollutes and poisons. And there's not a single warning on a bottle of Snapple. Coca-Cola doesn't have any warning. This can of Coke can kill you. Not a thing. I never saw the president of Coca-Cola brought before a court to account for all the people they're killing. Never saw the president of Snapple brought before a court to account for all the people they're killing. And your tax money subsidizes all that corn to be made in fructose sucrose. Sugar's going to kick your ass. Obesity is the #1 killer of Canadians today. And diabetes is going through the roof. Going through the roof because we're just swilling ourselves full of fructose sucrose. Not even a warning. No one called to account. Shouldn't even let that stuff in school, and they get kids growing up on it. Our parents letting people just put that stuff. And now that Crohn's disease, an explosion of Crohn's disease. You know, when I grew up, I never heard of Crohn's disease. Never saw a single example. I don't even know an example that existed before 1980. And since 1980, it's an explosion. And they think it's because milk. Oh, milk's good for you. I see all the ads. No, milk's got an enzyme in it that contributes to Crohn's disease. And now we got an explosion of Crohn's disease. Got tens of thousands of people in Canada with Crohn's disease, and no one ever heard of it before 30 years ago. Mother's milk will kill you. Well, actually, your mother's milk is going to be good. It's cow milk that's not good for you, and it's killing people. Even water, what could be safer than water? Yeah, well, tell that to Walkerton, Ontario, because I bet they all fucking boil their water now. 8 people died only a few years ago because government-approved tap water killed 8 people. Water kills you. Milk kills you. Fructose, sucrose is going to kill you. They're all legal. Nobody's called to court. Not a single person went to jail in Walkerton, Ontario for killing Canadian citizens with water. You can get killed by your deli meats. Nobody from Schneider's Meats is going to jail for the 12 people they killed with listeria last year. Never going to go to jail for that, I can guarantee you. Killing people in their deli meats, killing people in their milk, killing people with water, killing people with their soft drinks. Everything that's out there that's legal is killing you, and pot doesn't hurt anybody, contributes to the greatness. It's the only thing out there that's safe. Believe me, when I'm done talking to you, you won't be able to think of a single fucking thing other than weed that isn't going to kill you. Weed's the safest thing on earth. Aspirin is going to kill you. Aspirin kills people all the time. Aspirin and sesame seeds and peanuts and tobacco and sugar. Salt's going to kill you. You hang around old people. They was saying, don't put so much salt in those French fries. Oh, that's going to kill you. You're going to get hypertension. You're going to get high blood pressure. You're going to have a heart attack. Yeah, you absolutely fucking will have all those things because salt's bad for you. And our food is polluted with salt. You pick up a can of a soup, which, by the way, has no nutrient value. Not a single soup's any damn good for it. Comes in a can. But you look at it and go, whoa, 45% of my daily sodium in one can of soup? Yeah, it's because about a quarter of that can is just all salt. Okay? Because Canadians are so polluted and so decadent and so irresponsible about their own food that they don't even notice that, holy shit, Canadian pizzas, every pizza you buy has got too much salt. It's going to kill you. All that soup's got salt in it. Everything's got, McDonald's and every single fast food restaurant from Pizza to Wendy's, they have a scientist at work at their head office, and salt and sugar and fats, which you'll also kill, are all addictive. You got taste buds that go crazy, and your endorphins go nuts when you get that crap. Fats, salts, and sugars are going to kill you, and McDonald's formulates every single thing they sell. Whether it's a sweet thing like an apple turnover, or a Big Mac, or a burger, or a Filet-O-Fish, it's all precisely measured to have an addictive level of salt, sugar, and fat. There's not a single thing they don't sell that isn't dangerously unhealthy with those 3 items. And you know what? Vegetables don't have any salt, sugar, and fat, so we bribe our kids. Oh, eat your vegetables. Here, let me put a big pile of cheese on there. They'll give you some milk enzymes in there that give you Crohn's disease, but at least you fucking eat your vegetables right now. Right? Or we put salty things on or some kind of lure to get kids to eat their vegetables. Vegetables don't have anything bad in them. That's why nobody eats them, because we're all getting addicted to crap that kills you. And there's no law to punish any of them, and they all know they're doing it. Every person who works at McDonald's knows they're killing you on the installment plan. Every person who works at a tobacco company, an alcohol company, a prescription drug company. And here's the thing, too. Weed actually grows 100% here in Canada. All that money stays here in Canada. Pharmaceuticals come from Switzerland and Europe. And tobacco sometimes comes from here, but a lot of them are, and most alcohols are made elsewhere, too. Sesame seeds don't grow here. Cotton doesn't grow here. Peanuts don't grow here. Weed grows here. Weed grows here. And our government's committed to eradicating it. Think of this. Weed is the greatest business you could ever be in. Because here's what happens. Okay, let's say you're building an automotive company. And of course, we're subsidizing them incredibly with billions of dollars they don't deserve. And cars kill you too. What is that about cars? You can go up to 280 kilometers an hour in a car in a speed limit of 110. They're inviting you to kill somebody and kill yourself. Hey, they even sell it like that too. You look at those ads, and guys are so fucking stupid and vulnerable they're drinking at home, watching a hockey game, and they see that car ad, and that car's going 150, 180 kilometers through the desert, fucking doing wheelies. You ever done wheelies out on the highway? I haven't seen it myself, but I must be able to do it because you do it in those ads, and the dust is flying up in the air, and Robert Daltrey screaming from Won't Get Fooled. Guys love buying cars like that, right? Except you can't go 260 miles an hour unless you're drinking, probably, right? You can't go to it and say cars kill people every day and they're legal, and I've never seen the head of Ford Motor Company come to account in a court. You know, you can buy a gun legally and it kills people, and no manufacturer of any gun was ever held to account. I can't buy a gun, by the way, because I passed a joint, and I lost my right to own a firearm for 10 years for passing a joint. Unbelievable. Passing a joint can make me lose all my basic civil rights, all my human rights, lose my kids, lose my car, lose my right to possess a firearm. It's just incredible. Good God, what is going on? Everything that's legal in our society is a big, hypocritical, filthy lie out to kill you, with people who've got PhDs like doctors, captains of industries making millions of dollars, poisoning us, polluting us, deceiving us, lying to us. And they lie to us in our schools. Every teacher has taken a lot of drugs when he was in university, but they never can mention it in school. Teachers telling you, oh, don't do that, don't do that. They did that like crazy. Teachers can't even tell you about drugs. You know, the first person a student should be able to ask about drugs is their teacher. After all, you're my educator. You should be able to tell. No, when you sign up to be a teacher, you have to agree and sign a Board of Education contract that says you have disclosed everything you have ever done that might be a violation of the criminal law. And so if you admit to your students that you smoke pot, or maybe even grew a little pot, or maybe even dealt a little pot, you're out of a job. Goodbye to you. You cannot be a teacher if you smoke pot. So we get teachers who are hypocrites because they all did it, and now they can't say a thing. Just like, you know, pot people have 5 natural enemies in a way, because they're all the people in society that demand unquestioned obedience, suspend their critical thinking. They want unquestioned obedience, automatons, and that's parents, teachers, priests, politicians, and cops. And when you smoke your first joint, likely in grade 8 or grade 9, in my case, I was 22 years old, because when I was young, science fiction books and comics were my drug of choice. And it was a good choice. But when I was 22, I finally got high, and it was amazing. Where was I going? That will happen. I will. Critical thinking. And my wife knows. And, but what aspect of critical thinking? Well, that's true. Everything that's legal, gonna kill you, comes with a lie. And pot's the greatest plant. I mean, the evidence is everywhere. The evidence is everywhere that pot is the greatest contribution to the world today. And yet the people who benefit by it, the straight people, can you imagine if we all just retreated and withdrew and stopped producing for them? Stop producing our great computer games. Stop developing technology. Stop making great music. Stop performing athletic feats of prowess. Stop being brilliant engineers. If we stopped it all, what would the straight people have left? Their cameras would be big brownies from the 1950s. You know, there'd be all white guys playing basketball. Woo! How dull can you get? Right? It's a little Steve Nash. It'd be just him running down the empty court. All those things, you know, if we ask the people who want marijuana prohibition, who prop up the haters, they're really intolerant people. I think if we all had a chance perhaps to sit down with them for an hour and explain to them the incredible contributions we've made, maybe we could get to them. If we took the time, maybe we could get to them, but they are haters. And that's all it is, hate. My dad once explained to me, he said, Mark, you're going to find that sometimes in life, the people you do the most for, the people you go out of your way to help, the people you're so good to, will in fact turn out to resent you and hate you and ultimately even despise you and plot against you, because they know they're unworthy of everything you've done for them, and they can never balance the scales. And so they lash out at people who are really good to them. He said, it's odd. I know you won't understand it, because I was really young when I started helping people. And he said, but that's sometimes the way it is. And that's just the way it is with the prohibition of marijuana people. They take all our greatness, they take all the music we produce and the great inventions, and they use it, and then they hunt us down like dogs and despise us. What is going on there? What if we withdrew? They would learn the world so much less beautiful than what we have now, so much less functional. Can you imagine going back to your vinyl records? No, you can't. It's just not possible to have 10,000 records conveniently available like it is on the invention of Mr. Pothead Jobs. And the reason we live in such a lying, deceptive, hypocritical thing is incredibly simple. You won't even believe it. Because it's not because of health, because we're healthy. Marijuana's helping people. Everywhere the evidence is clear. Do we just need to go out anywhere in this room and talk to all the people who would swear on a Bible and in court that they benefit by their use of marijuana? Otherwise, why would we take it? Why would 7 million Canadians be doing this? It's because, and I know you're going to think, no, it's got to be more complicated. It can't possibly be this. It's because when you smoke pot in grade 8 or 9, you begin to look at the world with the clouds pulled aside. The curtain is now wide open, and you realize we live in a hypocritical sewer of double standards, lies, and deception. You realize everything your parents say is bullshit. You smoke pot and you see your teachers and it's all bullshit. You see the cop on the street and you realize he's an oppressor. When you see your priest and his mumbo-jumbo used to oppress you, his ancient books, his ancient works. See, the pot people, once you smoke pot, we don't accept that all the answers are in one book like the priest. We don't buy into his book of the Bible has all the answers. And we look at the cop and we don't believe the book of the law has all the answers. And in fact, it usually has none of the answers. The book of the law is a big bludgeon where one thing applies to everybody in the country. Life is far more nuanced and subtle than that. The answers are not in the book of the law. The answers to life are not in the book of the Bible. The government is not looking to help you. The government is not your friend. The government is the monopoly of the use of force. Every time the government gains power, it gets it from you, the individual. Whenever individuals are liberated, the government loses, and whenever the government wins, the people lose. It's a simple formula. It has no exceptions. Governments are inherently evil, and they're there to oppress us. And that cop, when he says everything you say can and will be used against you, you listen to that. That's the only thing he'll ever tell you that's true. Everything you say can and will be used against you. And it will be used against you because there are cameras on the street watching you make a deal. There's cameras on the street watching you smoke pot. There's informers everywhere. You don't know who's out there, who's your enemy. But there are lots of them, propped up by the state. So when you smoke marijuana, you become a critical thinker. You begin to question everything in this world. The most astute people who make critical judgments in politics and science are pot people, because we are thinking like a sentient human being. We are not buying into the obedient total order, one new world order, one government thing. We are all great creative individuals who want to be accepted as individuals, and believe me, the government has no tolerance for that. The purpose of prohibition is to suppress individual desire, individual autonomy, and individual rights. Under this government, we would be in jail by the thousands after Bill C. They are so controlling. They have a bill now called Bill C-32 that it's going to ban all our blunts. You won't be able to get flavored blunts anymore. I mean, ultimately, how petty could that be when our parliament only passes like 20 new laws every year, and one of them is to make blunts illegal? When did that become a compelling social interest to ban blunts? That's why we are hunted down like animals. That's why I'm going 5 years for selling seeds. Let me just tell you, of those arrests, most of the times I was never convicted. I was right and they were wrong. In 2003, I went on the Summer of Legalization tour where I smoked out 18 police stations in Canada, including Toronto's police station here, headquartered. And I was arrested 6 times alone and jailed overnight in each one of those places: Calgary, Edmonton, Regina, Winnipeg, St. John's, Newfoundland, and Moncton. And later on, I've been arrested in Saskatoon and many other places. And I was found not guilty. They dropped the charges because I was right. Pot was legal then. But you know what? You don't get an apology. It took me 3 years to get my $500 bail back from Winnipeg's court system after I was released. I've been arrested 17 times, and the most serious thing I have ever been convicted of was passing one joint. I've got convictions for selling bongs, promoting bongs. I didn't even know there was a fucking law. To this day, I still cannot find that law that says it's illegal to promote a bong. But I've got 2 convictions for it. I've got a conviction for giving half a gram of hash away to a U.S. tourist who incredibly got caught with it on the border and told them I gave it to him, and I got actually banned from the downtown of Vancouver for almost a year because I gave someone a half a gram of hash. I went to jail for 3 months because I passed a joint to a consenting adult. And what did I do with those seeds? I took these seeds that don't even contain any drug quality, that are genetically, to all intents and purposes, identical to the millions of seeds we sell in our grocery stores and in those cereal flakes. They're just seeds. Just seeds. And I've been covered the number one significant threat to the United States and Canada, the number one drug czar in Canada, and one of the top 50 most wanted in the world. And all I did was deliver seeds to consenting adults across an invisible line that doesn't even exist from space. Borders don't even exist when you look at the planet as one big living organism. What did I do that could make me such an evil, evil man? Well, you know what? It's because I told the people that you are free human beings who are entitled to take marijuana, entitled to think freely for yourself, and governments everywhere hate that. We saw that after 9/11. It's Alberto Gonzalez that said I'm on the top 50 most wanted, and that man's been indicted. The head of the DEA, Karen Tandy, on the day of my arrest, said on 5 occasions that I was being arrested for my propagandist marijuana magazine. Can you imagine the United States with over 500,000 people in the armed forces, the most powerful nation on earth, actually going out of their way to say my magazine is a cannabis culture, is a propagandist magazine? It tells you how much the government's actually really scared of me. And that's the great secret. Yeah, I'm going to jail for 5 years for selling seeds to consenting adults. No, nobody got hurt. No, not a single victim. You know, Karen Tandy talked on 5 occasions that my legalization efforts are going to go up in smoke now. Legalization groups won't be able to get any money from Emery anymore. Emery and his propagandist magazine are finished. But not one single word about any victim of anything I ever did. And nothing I ever did had a victim. I've helped thousands of people, delivered seeds to millions, out there planting weed everywhere. Look at California. Look what it is today. They're about to legalize marijuana in California. I must have supplied half the weed in California. And one day, I'll get my due. But for now, I just want to leave you with this. I'm going to be going away as early as September, October. And it'll be a 5-year term, and it would have been 25, 50, 100 years when they call you the largest producer of marijuana in the history of the U.S. criminal justice system. You know that's not the minimum. That's going to be the maximum or the near maximum. And it could have been $1 million fine. And once you have a fine, you cannot get transferred back to your own country if you have an outstanding fine. I don't have any money. Can hardly afford to come here, and certainly don't have $500,000 or $250,000 or $1 million to pay a fine. And if I'd have gotten 25 and 30 or 40 years and got a fine, then I could never be transferred back to Canada, and that means I would die in a U.S. jail, because the average person dies at age 65 in a U.S. federal penitentiary, and I'm 51 now, so anything around 10, 12, 14 years is a death sentence for me. And I thought, well, my lawyer said to me, well, Mark, think about that. Take this deal. Because I'm saying, I'm not taking any deal. I'm holding out. I'm going to fight this down the wire. And if they send me to... He said, no, don't think like that, man. Don't think like that. He said, listen, you think your wife is going to be able to carry on for 5, 10, 15 years knowing you're never coming back alive? You think a woman can... You want to put that to her when you have an opportunity to go there and just maybe stay here for 4 or 5 years, and if we all work hard and get you transferred back to Canada, you could be maybe home and seeing her in a year and a half, 2 years. Get real, man. You have to take this deal. You cannot leave your wife holding the bag for the rest of your life and watch her die in prison. Watch you die in prison. You think she can carry on and keep the movement going? No, she can't. So be realistic. You got to take this deal. And he said, it sucks. My lawyer's a great guy, hardly charged me anything, because he said all along, you're going to get screwed, and I feel really bad about it. Most of the people I defend are real bad guys, and everybody loves you, but it's not going to help you. Because the United States never, ever gets refused by the Canadian government extradition. Not a single request from the U.S., not a single request from the U.S. in 140 years has ever been turned down. He said, so you're doomed. And then he said, I've done everything I can. I've delayed it for 4 years, but now push comes to shove. They want to get rid of you by the Olympics, so they're going to get you. So you should take this deal. And that's why I'm taking this deal. I don't want to take this deal, but I've got a mission for you. Because, you know, in the 20 years we legalized books and magazines about literature, and we got medical marijuana, and we're still fighting for it. Guys like Matt Murnaugh are fighting for it. People in here are fighting for it because they're being thwarted and hurt and injured, and the quality of life's being there, basically being kicked in the balls every time by the government, because the government's always trying to thwart the court's intention. But we've got medical marijuana. We've got industrial hemp. This country's making clothes out of marijuana. We're making foods out of marijuana. Big companies are making cereal. I never thought I'd see it, really, when I first started, that I'd be eating cereal flakes and a big hemp flag on them. Never thought I'd see it. So we've done a lot. You know, when I first started in 1990 doing this, only 26% of Canadians wanted legal marijuana. And now, 52% of Canada wants to end marijuana prohibition. More incredibly, in my own home province, 63% of people want to end prohibition of marijuana because they know it would solve the gang crisis, know it would end the murders on the street. What kind of society do we have where we run down the greatest people in the history of this planet, the pot people, while we similarly give gangsters free rein to kill in our streets, all because of government policy? It doesn't make any sense. It's totally sick. So you've got to do something about it while I'm gone. I'm going to be real pissed if I stay in jail for 5 years and get out only to find that we have the same fucking prohibition in this country 5 years after I've gone to jail. If you think that you owe me anything, you owe me to work your damnedest to make sure this pogrom, this prohibition ends. And the first thing you have to do, because I'm just shocked and appalled that stoners don't get out to vote. You know, sometimes people say, Mark, can we do any radical action? Yeah, you can do some radical action. What would really make a difference if people went to jail as warriors, not as victims? We get rounded up all the time. Man, me and so many people here have been busted trying to buy a little weed, grow a few plants, do a few things, go to jail as victims. No. We've got to pick the time and place we go to jail, and then we'll be going to jail as warriors. And somebody said, well, what can we do? I said, I'll tell you what you can fuck shit up. Peacefully, non-violently, you can fuck shit up. You know what you should do? Wrap yourself full of chains, get a couple other people, go to the biggest bridge in this community, walk across the bridge, stop traffic right down there, throw a banner over the side of the bridge saying, stop prohibition now, and watch the shit hit the fan. Watch the shit hit the fan. You're going to go to jail, you'll go to jail, but you will fucking hold up traffic for hours on end. You know who won't care? There'll be people on there that are stoned, and the stoners going, more power to you, man, I'm just going to smoke a big one right here and chill out while you do your thing. The pot people won't be angry at you, and the straight people will, and fuck them. Fuck them, because they owe us. They're not paying any attention, all right? So we've got to inconvenience them. We've got to become more radical, more demonstrative, always peaceful and honest, and always educating, and always willing to sacrifice ourselves, not others. No revolution is ethical if you sacrifice others. But inconveniencing the people who make this go on for 45 years, that's legitimate. Put a big banner that says, end prohibition now. And you're going to go to jail for a week. You go to jail for 2 weeks. Might even go to jail for a month. Maybe you won't go to jail at all. But in your brain, if you're prepared to go to jail, you will be a hero to the movement and a hero in your own mind. And life is short. And courage is in short supply. So if my message hits anyone out there, you can make a big difference as an activist. You'll be able to tell your kids what you did in the war to free the Canadian people after 45 years. 2 million victims. 2 million victims. People taking their kids away, losing their houses. You know, we're owed a big apology, and that's what you're fighting for. A formal end to this war on us, an apology from the government that was just a sadistic pogrom that doesn't have any benefit to anyone else whatsoever. It's a social policy of a disastrous, epic proportions. We need compensation for every day any of us spent in jail for weed, $100 a day. We need all our property restored, all the fucking weed they took from me. They took over $1 million worth of stuff from me in 5 raids, and I want it back. I want it back, and we're all entitled to get it back. And we're gonna get it back. Except, you know what? I'd love it if someone would do some radical action, blocking bridges, chaining themselves to police stations, you know, spray painting vice squad cop cars, all sorts of good things. Free the weed right over where it says Metro Police. We need a lot more of that, but what we need even before any of that behavior is get out and fucking vote. Most stoners don't vote. And you know who does vote? The old people who are putting us down, who vote for the Conservative government, who are the weaselly Liberal Party, you know, the Bloc Québécois, the Green Party of Canada, and the NDP, for the most part, have been really good. They voted against Bill C-15. They believe in the legalization of marijuana. Get out and vote. Get out and give some money to some candidate that wants to legalize pot. Help out the Green Party. Get Elizabeth May elected. Make sure you invoke more NDP members in the next federal election. NDP voted against Bill C-15. They kept faith with us. That Jack Layton's a weasel every now and then. I'm not going to front otherwise. Guy comes into my house, begs for our support. We deliver thousands and thousands of voters to them, thousands and thousands of members, and now the guy won't even look me in the eye when he sees me. Won't even look me in the eye. And he's from Toronto here. So go kick his ass too, just to remind him who the fuck he is. He's just the leader of the opposition party, and if he wants to be prime minister and have some clout, he's got to be faithful to the people he actually makes commitments to. That man came into my house and said he would urge the legalization of marijuana with absolutely no qualification whatsoever. He called marijuana that beautiful plant. A beautiful thing, though, and we should be able to consume it peacefully in our own home. He said, you remind him, go to that Pot TV, my website, and look at that famous interview with Jack Layton comes to my home and starts saying all these wonderful things, and now he won't even look me in the eye. Won't even bring it up in Parliament. Do you know what? There's a bill in the Congress of the United States where 70 congressmen, including the most beautiful, wonderful politician ever put on this planet, only one like him, and when he dies, this is going to be a sad place in the world. There's a beautiful old man, 72-year-old from Texas, of all places, hard to believe. His name is Ron Paul. And Ron Paul is the greatest man in this continent today. He's the greatest politician ever. And he's got a bill before the UN. Every year, Ron Paul has a bill to end the drug war. Every year, Ron Paul has a bill to legalize medical marijuana. Every year, Ron Paul has a bill to make industrial hemp legal. And Ron Paul says he wouldn't even tax marijuana. He should think it's going to be legal right the fuck now. And you know what? He has never seen marijuana in his life. He says, I don't know anybody that smokes marijuana. I've never seen it. But it's just not right what they do to these people. Now, there's a beautiful man, doesn't smoke, doesn't know anything about smoking, but as a matter of principle, he knows we're in a vicious pogrom, and we're being put. Ron Paul and Barney Frank have a bill that legalizes 4 ounces or less for every adult in the United States, and he has 70 co-signers. Now, the House of Representatives has 535 people, so you're going to need 270 votes to get anything passed. But the fact he's got 70 congressmen, because you know what? Not a single member of parliament in this country, in a country where 52% of the people want to legalize weed, not a single member of parliament ever got up and said, Mr. Speaker, considering the majority of Canadians want to legalize marijuana and end this marijuana prohibition, which causes all this gang violence, which seduces our teenagers into a life of crime and causes all this upheaval and social disorder and addiction, all this prohibition. Mr. Speaker, the majority of people want to legalize it. Should we have a vote on this right now, Mr. Speaker? And I vote yes, we should repeal marijuana. Not a single member of parliament's ever got up to propose such a bill. Bunch of cowards, weaklings, liars. Not even Jack Layton's ever got up to propose. Even Libby Davis, a beautiful person with the NDP, always on our side. She's never got up and put up a private member's bill that says, let's just end the marijuana program. Not even a single debate on it. Even though the Senate, bunch of old geriatrics in charge of looking after Bill C-15, and it looks like they might pass it unless you actually get hold of them. They voted in 2002, every last one of them unanimously voted that marijuana prohibition caused nothing but trouble, and that marijuana should be legalized right away for anybody over 15. A bunch of old men said marijuana should be legal. After listening to over 600 witnesses over 2 years, they had overwhelming evidence that marijuana was not harmful, that prohibition was a disaster, and every last one of those old geezers, conservative and liberal, agreed we got to end marijuana prohibition. And now, 6 years later, a majority of them are ready to pass Bill C-15, which does the exact opposite. Fucking hypocrites. Can't even stick to their own beliefs. Can't even follow their own science. You know, the Minister of Justice, as it's ironically called, is a guy named Rob Nicholson. You know, 20 years ago, he was the Ministry of Science under Brian Mulroney. And when he was brought before the committee, they said, do you have a single study that shows that mandatory minimums that put thousands of people in jail are any use to the Canadian public? Because we have all these studies that show mandatory minimums are harmful. And Rob Nicholson, the science minister, says, we don't have any studies that show that, but we know the Canadian people are behind us. That was it. The former Minister of Science can't even produce one study or bit of evidence that locking up thousands of young people and encouraging them to join gangs and enforcing the marijuana prohibition is of any value to the Canadian people. And it isn't. There is no evidence. It's not of any value. It's a pure, vicious pogrom of hatred. And it's up to you while I'm gone to try and do everything you can, because if they can send me, if they can call me the #1 drug czar, if they can call me the top 50 most wanted in the world because I sold seeds of the world's greatest plant to consenting adults, then you, my dear friends, are going to be targeted, as we all will, for a life in some concentration camp. Because everything in life is directional. If we let them get away with this, we're all going to be in metaphorical cages in a matter of years. Every generation has to fight for its own freedom. Some people ask me, Mark, what happens when marijuana is legal? Won't that be great? Yeah, you know what? And there'll be some tyrant trying to make it illegal the next day. So don't bet on it being legal for long. Every generation has to fight for your freedom every fucking day of your life to the day you die, because there's tyrants trying to take it away every minute of every day. And it's your obligation while I'm gone to do what you can to keep this country free. Thanks very much. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
We got a mic at the back. If there's anybody that has any questions, this is a great time to ask Mr. Emery and maybe even Jodie. Just line up over there and ask away.
And I'd like to thank the sponsors, Matthew Oliver, who brought us here. Fantastic. Thank you, Matthew. Where are you, Matthew? Where are you? Good. And I thank Vapor Central for hosting it. Did they charge you money to get in? Yeah? Did they charge money? Oh, fuck them then. They're making lots of money then. No, Vapor Central. Chris Goodwin. Actually, Chris Goodwin is a remarkable man. He's actually, in some ways, I like to think of myself as a courageous man. I read Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged 30 years ago, and it changed my life the day I finished reading it. I was determined to be a one-man machine on a mission to make Canada a freer place any way I could ethically, honestly, transparently do it. And Chris Goodwin comes the closest to my idea of the ultimate activist. He's gone to jail. He's paid his dues 6 months. He's had cops visit him. He's been roasted. He's gone through it. He is one of the greatest activists this country has, the manager here of Vapor Central. And you know what? I'm really going to miss him while I'm gone because he's one of the greatest individuals I've ever met and know. But I know this. While I'm gone, Chris Goodwin is going to be kicking ass. He's going to be leading the revolution. He's going to be putting the fight forward. Chris Goodwin does not have any fear because he knows what he is doing is 100% legitimate, right? And I just want to say thanks, Chris Goodwin, for putting this on with Matthew and bringing me here, and that I hope you all support Chris Goodwin, because it's the great ones that are always targeted by the government for elimination, and Chris has certainly got a bullseye on him for all the incredible work he has done. So, and thanks to Dom Kramer, because Chris Goodwin was influenced by my work. He'll be glad to tell you that. He's an acolyte of mine. And Dom Kramer read my famous article, How to Open Your Own Hemp Store, in 1995, and he opened all his great shops in town. And Dom Kramer, I like to say, has probably been inspired by my work and is one of the greatest examples of what one individual can do. He's got compassion clubs, seed stores, Vapor Central, Kindred Cafe, Toronto Hemp Company, an incredible hempire. And that's what I want you to do. That's what I'm hoping to do. I want to spread a little inspiration so that while I'm gone, the revolution gets bigger, more powerful, and you're all motivated to do stuff. Open a hemp store, open a business, get on the internet and start a website. Get out there and hold a rally. Chain yourself to a police station. Chain yourself across a bridge. Fuck shit up. Make yourself heard, because if you don't, we're going to lose the liberties we have, and they're running out on us very quickly. So let's take some questions.
Questions?
I like the idea that I was so complete no one has any questions there.
Mark, you're a champion, man. I don't know how you can do it. Listen, why the hell, how many people are being extradited to the U.S.? You're making precedent here, or?
Well, typically, I'm a Canadian. I never did any business in the United States. I haven't been there in 20 years. Certainly all the time I've been selling seeds. I never went to the United States, and I never even left Canada because I thought they'd try and get me, and I was probably right. The kind of people get extradited, usually people commit capital crimes in the U.S.
Yeah.
And they're wanted and they're sought and they're returned, or people who are doing massive $1 million plus telemarketing scams with Americans and stuff like that. So the idea that someone is selling seeds and being extradited. And by the way, the Liberal government with Irwin Cotler, a vaunted human rights activist, actually signed me to be taken away by the United States. So, here's a guy who is our Justice Minister, human rights, and he signed me off. And Rob Nicholson has no love for me whatsoever. Stephen Harper loathes us. We had a protest 2 months ago when he came to Vancouver, and we chanted, politicians who support prohibition support organized crime, for 4 hours on end, and interrupted his press conference. He couldn't have it. It was to announce Bill C-15, and we ruined his whole day. And he knows that I and Jodie organized it. He saw me there in front screaming my head off endless for 4 hours. He couldn't have his press conference. When he drove away, he was furious and scowling in his car. And and so Stephen Harper dislikes me, and he should, because we are his enemy like he is our enemy. And it's either we destroy his political power or he destroys us as a people. So, I've made enemies, and that's what this is all about. When you've got the head of DEA going on and issuing a statement talking about my propagandist marijuana magazine, all my legalization activity. When you've got the head of the U.S. Justice Department saying I'm one of the 50 most wanted in the world, and when John Walters came to Vancouver in 2002, and he was speaking before hundreds of police officers and politicians, I happened to be there with 10 activists we managed to get in, and I heckled him unmercifully for his entire speech, because every time he told a lie about marijuana, which was always, then we would heckle him with words like jailer, incarcerator, bullshit, liar, and he just melted down. He turned purple, beet red. It was all filmed on TV and broadcast on the news. His entire trip was ruined. And 3 days later, I had an investigation launched against me by Vancouver Police and DEA and the U.S. Department of Justice. They take vengeance very seriously, and I have pissed off every last one of them. The head of the drug czar, the head of DEA, and the head of the Canadian government, Stephen Harper. So, there's no love lost in the halls of power for me. You know what? We did a freedom of access information request. We wanted to know what kind of correspondence was going on between the Ministry of Justice in Canada and the U.S. Department of Justice to put me away. And there's actually 6,000 pages of email correspondence between those two entities over what to do with me. And you know what? Every single word is blacked out. We got the first 100 pages, and they showed it to us and said, look, Mark, every single word is blacked out. It's all national security, they say. And can you imagine? And then they said there's 6,000 pages. Imagine how many bureaucrats, how many people in the Ministry of Justice have been working to get rid of you and basically outsource the justice system to the Americans. Because remember, I've been charged a lot.
We'll hide you any time in Toronto. You come to Toronto anytime you want to hide.
Well, my brother's
you gotta hide, man. You gotta go on the lam.
My brother's no, I can't do that.
OJ did it. Everybody's done it.
No. See, that's not me, though. See, I'm looking down the road at my historical legacy. I'm looking at the millions and millions of people one day. They're going to go on the internet and see the DVD Principate or the movie Principate. I'm in lots of different movies, even from comedies like Super High Me. By the way, I brought the movie DVD Principate here. It's an awesome movie that CBC did. Over 4 million Canadians have seen it. It's been aired 12 times. We brought the DVD here, and I sell it for $15, and I'll be glad to autograph it for you. It's got 10 extra scenes in it. I will tell you that they added one extra scene because there was only one complaint about the movie, and that's that you saw my ass too much. All right, so anybody seen that movie, my ass is in there twice, I'm just warning you, but they tried to balance that off. They got a nice scene of Jodie being interviewed in bed with just a little blanket wrapped around her, so they tried to add the female sex appeal there because there were a lot of complaints. There was too much of old man Mark's ass and not enough of Jodie's. So, so we tried to balance that off, so it's only $15. I'm selling that, so after we're done here, I'm staying as long as it takes till the last person wants to talk to me, and I'd love to be able to sign that DVD for it because it's a great movie. And what I'm looking down the road is the reason I don't run my brother's a Christian minister. He offered me sanctuary, and other people have said, come into my cabin in the middle of the woods. Nope, none of that's for me. I am going down with this ship. If this ship is going down, I am going down with it because it's my ship. These are my people. I am never abandoning the cause, and I can't abandon you, and ultimately, I can't abandon the future generations of people that I want to see what I did and inspire them to do it too, so that we can have an army of millions. An army of millions. We need an army of millions of people willing to do what it takes. And what it takes at the beginning is just vote, get involved, run as a candidate, write a letter to the editor, write a letter to your senator. Ontario has tons of senators, and if they vote against Bill C-15, it's the greatest thing you'll be able to achieve in this generation, other than short of legalizing marijuana, because you're going to save thousands and thousands of people from going to jail if you get the Senate to reject Bill C-15. And then we need an election. Then we need to get rid of these goddamn conservatives. We need to make sure your voice heard, because I know most of the people in this room did not vote in the last election. And that's because you don't believe it does any good. Believe me, not voting does no good, absolutely, without question. Next question there, sir.
Hello, Mark. I was assuming that during this whole process you were put under some sort of surveillance, and I was hoping that you could talk about that experience.
Well, I'm always watched. I used to, when I was entrapped by the DEA, she was trying to buy, they bought seeds for me, but they tried to buy weed from me. And first they tried to buy it on the phone. They said, Mark, can you tell me where I could buy 10 pounds of weed? Can you hook me up? And I'm going, I assume my phone is always monitored because I'm like the heat score #1 in this country. So you're asking for 10 pounds of weed is absurd. I said, that's like the kind of thing that someone would do if they were a narc or completely a moron. So I said, never bring that up again over the phone and never ask me. And we didn't talk about it. She was buying seeds over a year, and now she's trying to get me to commit to selling it. So then she comes and sees me in person. She writes me an email. She said, can you sell me to? I write her back an email. No, stop asking. I don't even sell weed. That's not my thing. I don't sell weed. I'm certainly not going to sell you 10 pounds so you can get caught at the border, because you will, because you're that not naive. And then she asked me in person, and I thought it was really odd, so I even looked at her. I said, you know what? Your persistence about asking me for 10 pounds weed makes me think you're a narc. And sure enough, 7 days later, a massive raid on me occurred, and she was a narc, and they had to move it forward quickly because she realized she was asking for such a brazen thing that it was obvious she was a narc. I had to give the U.S. government and the Canadian government exact details of where I am at all times whenever I leave British Columbia. So my entire tour, the Americans can follow me. And they do. They watch me on Facebook. They read all our forums on cannabis culture. And I know that because my 2 co-accused are pleading guilty, and they're getting 2 years probation. So at least I didn't drag anybody else down in this whole thing. No one else is going to jail but me. But in their pre-sentence report, it shows that they have been monitoring every single correspondence and every speech and every video and everything I've ever done publicly since 1999. They have studied. They have dozens and dozens of people working on an analysis of my operation and my life's work, even though they actually concede at this point that I never kept any of this money for myself. I paid all my taxes on it. I've never had a problem with the Canadian government on taxes. I paid $10,000 to $15,000 a month every month in income taxes from 1999 to 2005. Paid $600,000 in taxes. Everybody knew what I was doing. I never kept this money, and there's no victim. But nonetheless, they have dozens of agents in Canada and the United States keeping an eye on everything I ever said and do, because like they've said, I'm the most significant threat to the government of the United States in all of Canada. And that's flattering. And I'm happy. By the way, the only thing I fear, I am not scared to go to a U.S. jail. I might be being naive, and maybe I'll be scared when I get there, which is more appropriate anyway. But I'm not afraid of my own destiny, whatever that is. The only thing I worry about is that my wife, whom I love dearly, and Jodie's been with me all her adult life. We've worked together as editors for 4.5 years. She joined my forums 8 years ago. She's known me all her adult life. I'm going to be very sad to know that she'll have to cope thinking about me in jail every day, worrying about me, trying to cope looking after our stores and our lounges and our website and everything while I'm gone. So I want everybody to make sure you help out my wife. Make sure you go to CannabisCulture.com. Pay attention to when she says I need help. Maybe they put me in solitary for a month or so. I'm going to need you people to raise and fuck shit up to make sure nobody treats me like that. Because I already know they're going to send me to a U.S. federal penitentiary with only aliens, because I'll be the only Canadian in this jail that I'm going to. It could be in Georgia, it could be in Florida, Texas, California, probably one of those states, and I'll be with all Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, Guatemalans, Central Americans, and people from South America. So figure that out. I'm going to be the only Canadian in that environment, so believe me, it's going to be an inhospitable, difficult time, but I'm going to get...
All your customers are good.
I'm confident that I'll be okay. I'm not worried about that. I just want to make sure everything is groovy out here. And don't send me letters, by the way, that say, I'm sorry you're in jail, that must suck. Yes, I am in jail right now, and it sucks. I don't need you reiterating that in every letter. So here's what I want you to do. When you send me letters in jail, if you send me a letter, I want you to write me about what you fucking did to end the drug war. I want to hear about what you're doing while I'm gone. I want to hear you justify why I should spend my time reading your letter. I want to hear about what you're doing to make the world a better place, making it better for our people, our culture, and how you're going to be able to tell your kids you did something worthwhile before we all lost our freedoms and ended up in some tyrannical dictatorship where we're all going to jail for smoking a little bit of weed. That's what I want to hear.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Hey, Mark. I'm Mike.
Hey, Mike.
I got a question. Do you think it's not so much the hate-mongering political climate we find ourselves in that's a hurdle to ending prohibition, as much as the economic incentive law agencies have in pursuing prohibition laws and lining their own pockets with that money?
Listen, I'm not saying that there isn't big money to be made in prohibition. Heck, all the cops ever say is we need more cops to fight the gangsters on the street that the cops created in the first place because they keep asking for more severe drug laws. The cops know what they're doing. It's just a big gravy train for them. We've got like 75,000 police officers in this country, and every politician listens to them. And by the way, your job whenever you meet a cop and you're not being arrested is to try to get him to read law enforcement against prohibition stuff. Those are the only good cops in North America, is the people who once were drug warriors and now are fighting the prohibition as law enforcement. Leap.cc is their website, and I think it's our job, because every cop knows in his heart the drug war is a failure. Every cop knows it doesn't do anything but create more violence and more gangs and more disorder on the street. Every cop knows that they're making a lot of money. In Vancouver alone, there's 350 police officers making over $100,000 a year and a lot of overtime just to be a participant in the drug war. It's fantastically expensive on the public purse. Cops making lots of money on the drug war. Judges making lots of money on the drug war. All these highly paid people, court clerks, lawyers making tons of money on the drug war. Lots of people, professionals making a big killing, victimizing the most vulnerable people in society, us. So yeah, there's a lot of people on the gravy train, politicians making money and power by scapegoating us. So we've got to be more numerous, more determined. The problem is that we don't go to jail as warriors. We need more desperate action out there on the street. More peaceful, honest, but civilly disobedient, forceful actions. And yet, I can't even get most of you to get out and vote. So how hopeful am I going to be?
Thank you, Mark.
Right here.
Yeah. Ron Paul doesn't smoke pot, but he's the biggest pothead you'll ever see, if you can judge what he says and does.
Can you repeat that question?
He asked, is there anybody out there who's ever been 100% pothead politician? Yeah, Pierre Trudeau smoked pot. Even Kim Campbell admitted to smoking marijuana in her brief time as Prime Minister. She said, oh, I smoked it. And you know what? She was actually the Justice Minister of this country in the Mulroney government, and she actually said to the press, but I didn't know it was illegal when I did it. What the hell? Kim Campbell, Prime Minister, smoked pot. You know, Jean Chrétien, I'll give him credit, at least for a moment, wanted to legalize pot, but then they sent his Justice Minister of the United States, Martin Cochon, and he got his ass kicked by the drug czar, and that was over, and then they cleared out Jean Chrétien. He was gone in no time. Nothing ends your career faster, it would seem, in the echelons of politics than to say you want to legalize pot. And so only Ron Paul does it, and yet he's probably one of the most popular politicians in the United States, doesn't even smoke marijuana. And yet Bill Clinton smoked pot, and he renounced it, right? And we've got George Bush smoked pot, and thank goodness he renounced it, right? But people of, politicians who smoked pot, Brian Tobin of Newfoundland, cabinet minister, the premier of British Columbia, Glenn Clark, smoked pot. And I'll tell you one thing, our current premier of British Columbia, Gordon Campbell, doesn't smoke pot, but he's a convicted drunk driver. Convicted drunk driver can be premier of our province, but anybody who smokes pot's not qualified. Even Ralph Klein smoked pot when he was young, but decided he'd become an alcoholic. And of course, they voted for him as premier over and over again. Alcoholics got no problem getting elected premier or prime minister of this country. You know, when Prime Minister Harper was asked if he'd ever smoked a joint, he said no, because when I was offered a joint, I was too drunk. That's his official statement. I was too drunk to know what was going on when I was offered a joint. I was too drunk. And that's your prime minister. And that tells you everything you need to know. Alcohol poisoned their brain, poisoned their standard of living. All those politicians are drinking alcohol, killing each other, killing themselves, and yet put us away. And they all know better, too. Every last one of them. Lots of politicians smoke pot. But here's the thing I do know. As soon as you stop smoking pot, it's because you sell out. You sold out to another god. You sold out to the god of power or the god of control or the god of money. People, whenever they tell me they stopped smoking pot, it's because they took a job somewhere or they got power. Oh, I got kids now, so I got to lie to my kids, so I can't smoke pot. And if I smoked pot, I wouldn't be lying to my kids because pot doesn't let you tell a lie. Pot compels you to tell the truth because pot's all about enlightenment and open up your mind. And as soon as you stop smoking pot, you close your mind again. Close your mind again and start telling your kids lies. That's why I hear parents saying, oh, I used to smoke lots of pot, but I got kids now. I used to smoke a lot of pot, but I'm a teacher now. I used to smoke a lot of pot, but I joined the church now. I used to smoke a lot of pot, but I'm a cop now. I used to smoke a lot of pot, but I'm a booze-swilling politician now. Fucking hypocrites. That's what I say. Pot people, the only honest people you can trust. Everybody else is a liar. But nonetheless, we've got to convince them and get them over. So the first thing you do when you find someone who's never smoked pot or stopped smoking pot, it's time to bring them back into the fold. You got to get them high once again. Bring them back. I don't think 7 million Canadians smoking weed is enough. We need more people smoking pot. And that's your other job, too. Write a letter to the senators. Get this law, Bill C-15, stop. Smoke more people up. Get that weed around. Grow more pot. Join the revolution. Do something radical. Yes.
Hi, my name is Andrew on behalf of youtube.com/legalize the green. I have to say I'm a big fan and I'm honored to be in your presence. Your big political movement on the internet is actually astonishing, and the info war is beginning to be exposed. I have to say that you have great documentary story. I'm really high right now. So, the Prince of Pot, Escape to Canada, and Pod TV, of course, when Greg Williams chirped Stephen Harper for not letting his son listen to the Beatles. I just found that hilarious.
Yeah, actually, that's how this all started, too. Stephen Harper said his young son brought up his Sgt. Pepper album.
I know.
Why his son had his Sgt. Pepper album. And he
from my
said,
friends.
Dad, what does the lyrics to Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds mean? And then all of a sudden, he had to round up all the potheads because, my God, his son was discovering Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. So they're still fighting the culture war against the 60s generation, because the 60s generation is the only generation, the only period in our history time where honesty, dissent, critical thinking, and being opposed to the government and being opposed to war was ever completely socially acceptable. Because what do we got now? We've been involved in a war in Afghanistan for 8 years, and now not only are we of a war against our own people, but now we're eradicating the opium plants and the weed plants and the hash in Afghanistan. We have become part of the problem. We are becoming part of the problem because Stephen Harper and the Liberal government have committed us to wars here, a drug war, and a war abroad. Another great reason.
All because of the United States of America.
No. Listen, that's a cheap excuse.
And Barack Obama as an oligarch to the bankers.
Our government bends over backward for the United States. It's our own cowardice, our own lack of commitment, our own lack of success as a culture in replacing politicians like that, because we don't vote, we don't get involved. We can't. Most of you people won't even, after I tell you, after all you've learned, won't write your senator. Won't even write your senator to say, stop Bill C-15. You won't even think about it. You're going to go home and smoke pot and watch television or do something. Okay?
Sir.
Do you have a question?
I have to ask you, do you think the swine flu, the H1N1, is a propagated corporate swindle to get people to take flu shots as well? And do you think that they're trying to target the marijuana smokers, as passing a joint could cause a spread of bacteria?
Actually, let me just explain to you. You don't spread bacteria or viruses when you pass a joint.
I agree with THC period.
No, it's not necessarily that. When I pass a bong, let's pretend this is a bong here. When I pass a bong, I was just told a very simple thing by a doctor. Just put a flame around the top of that bong and it instantly sterilizes it. Because viruses and bacteria don't exist with a radical change in heat. They have parameters of which they can survive. Once you put a flame over a bong head, that's 500 degrees. Instantly kills everything. So when you're inhaling a joint, that cherry of that joint is 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit. It's 400 degrees, even a quarter inch away. So as you're drawing that smoke through, its temperature is actually somewhere between 150 degrees and 300 degrees. It actually cools down radically even as it gets to your throat. It drops to a tolerable temperature. But while it's passing over that joint, it kills every bacteria and virus on any joint. So joints never spread any kind of bacteria. And if you sterilize a bong every time with a flame, you don't pass anything there. So we're not vulnerable to those things. Otherwise, I'd have every disease known to man. I never get sick. If anything, I look at it that every time, and I've smoked with guys who got AIDS like lots of times. I've never turned down a joint. You could have leprosy and I'd smoke your joint because I'm not going to get it. Right? I'm one of the healthiest people alive because my body is saturated with THC, and as a consequence, I am confident about what I'm doing. By the way, one of the reasons I am able to do this is I had two great parents. I grew up in an era where nobody had any money, but everybody had two parents. I got lots of love from my folks. They had faith and confidence in me that I was going to make something of their legacy. My dad grew up in poor Birmingham, England, living in a ghetto, 8 brothers and sisters, working in a motorcycle factory at 13, went into the Navy and fought World War II for 6 years, starting when he was 17. Never saw him raise his voice to my mom ever. Never saw him strike her. Man came home every day and spent a half hour with me shooting that hockey puck or throwing the baseball. I grew up with 2 loving parents, and that's why I'm able to do this, because they gave me the confidence to go forward, even to look at jail. So both my parents are dead, But if there's some way they can pick up the vibe, I'm always, every day, grateful to have two great parents who made me confident and believe in myself and believe in the people around me.
We're going to take 2 more questions.
Sure.
Cool.
Oh, sure.
There's one thing I want to point out actually about America and Canada and our governments. About a year ago, or in 2008 January, there was a news story broke about Marc Emery accepting a 5-year prison sentence, blah, blah, blah. So it's like, well, why didn't that happen? Well, the agreement was the Americans said, you know, our lawyer is a smart guy, and he was trying to figure out anything he could, and he came up with a very intelligent loophole where he said, if the Canadian government charges you here, you can go to the U.S., plead guilty, and the Americans will let you serve your time in Canada, no prison time in the U.S., and you'll get out right away. Well, America agreed to that. Mark and our lawyer agreed to that. But the Canadian government said, no, fuck you. We want you to go down to America. So bullshit. The Canadian government is the one that worked against it, and the Canadian government is, again, ignoring all of your petitions. I have a pile about this big of petitions. Yeah, tons of it. The Canadian government is our enemy right now. You need to get that goddamn conservative government out of power. I mean it.
We won't be able to emphasize enough. And like I said, I'm reminding you, I know more than half you did not vote. Probably 3/4 you didn't vote. So if we can't change that, if we can't even make a commitment one day out of every 3 or 4 years to show up for 2 hours, then our movement is doomed. We need a concerted effort. We need you to use that pot to psychically make yourself a warrior for our cause and do all the little things as well as the bigger things to end this war on drugs. Yes, sir.
Mark, you're beautiful, buddy. You're beautiful. Hey, buddy, I have multiple sclerosis. I know I deal with a doctor who won't sign a petition.
Glad you asked that because I've got the way to deal with that.
And the other part of it is I believe it's the drug companies. It's the government. Somewhere along the line, I believe they're the ones who are making the money. Somewhere along the line, and you got the drug companies.
Here's what you do. I actually meet lots of people every day who said, Mark, I've got multiple sclerosis, I got Crohn's disease or whatever, and my doctor won't even sign. My family doctor of 20 years won't sign my MMAR so I can become a medical exemptee. And I met a guy in Thunder Bay. He said, Mark, you know what I did? I simply went to every single clinic and I sat there and waited for every single doctor and I explained to him and I would just keep going and going until some doctor signed my papers. And he said, and by the 9th doctor, he signed my papers. He was a university graduate, knew all about medical marijuana, knew all about therapies. He said, so my advice, Mark, is to have everybody go to every clinic in their community and sit there and talk to every doctor over and over again until one of them signs it, because one of them will sign it. Either one of them is going to be an older doctor who's got lots of experience dealing with people with Crohn's disease or MS and marijuana helps them. After all, the Hippocratic Oath says, do no harm. You're doing terrible harm to a person if you let them be a criminal, considered a criminal, while they medicate themselves against something that they have. It's definitely doing harm. You remind a doctor of his Hippocratic Oath. He doesn't even need to know about marijuana. All he needs to know is that you need it really bad in order to cope with your ailment, and that should be enough. So you remind him how much marijuana helps and tell him the Hippocratic Oath says, do no harm. Could you please sign my papers? And I bet within the first 10 doctors, one of them is going to sign. Now, it's only good for a year, but at least you can get the ball rolling and have your legal exemption for a year and then continue looking for another doctor. Go to every single doctor in every clinic until someone signs those papers. And I think you'll be able to do that. That's especially with Crohn's disease. Crohn's disease is so clearly alleviated by medical marijuana. Crohn's disease is one of the classic illnesses, along with multiple sclerosis, where marijuana has helped every single person who has Crohn's disease and every single person who has multiple sclerosis. So go to those clinics and sit there and talk to that doctor. If he says no, go to another one the next day and the next day and the next day. And when all of us are doing that, thousands of people getting it, they'll get the message. And remember, the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm. And those doctors do harm all the time. So you explain to them how they're going to make your standard of living and they'll make your quality of life so much better. Will you please sign my papers and take 10 seconds of your valuable time, Mr. Physician?
First off, I just want to say it's an honor, and you said that this is a world where courage is scarce, and you're definitely a beacon of courage to all of us. I mean,
well, you
are
much.
Exactly what we need to be, and I'm honored. You mentioned Steve Jobs. It's funny because I write iPhone apps for a living, and in the last 10 years, in 1999, Apple hired Steve Jobs, and at that point, they had 1.0% of the entire PC market. And I just wanted to say that I read a report today that said they have 9% of the percent of the PC market right now, and that's been the 10 years since Steve Jobs was hired. So go pop, people.
Yeah, there you go. Actually, though, I was talking about the period in 1979 to 1984 when he developed the Mac computer. I only talk about things I can prove, and I can prove that he was a pothead in that period. I like to think he's still smoking marijuana because he's had cancer recently, and I bet, you know what? I bet he stopped smoking marijuana, and that's why he got cancer. I think there's a correlation there. I hope he started smoking it again, though. It'll help him out.
Do you feel that Obama has been a step in the right direction as far as politicians in the U.S. is concerned?
I do not. In fact, I almost wish George Bush were president because you know what? It was easy to get everyone to hate George Bush, and since George Bush was the president who supervised my extradition, it was easy to get people worked up to do something. But now that the chocolate Jesus man is the president of the United States, and everybody thinks he's so sweet like chocolate, and so intelligent and smart, with such a nice family and nice kids. But guess what? The war still goes on in Afghanistan and Iraq. The war is getting wider now in Pakistan. They're bombing villages with drones. They still got Guantanamo Bay. The CIA is never going to account for all its torture. Still got extraordinary rendition. The man has managed to sink the economy by inflating the dollar beyond all belief. More bigger deficits in the United States than ever before. Going to bring that country to its knees. Not a single substantive change has happened since President Obama became president, except one thing. In May 20th, he issued a memorandum to all federal agencies that said we are no longer going to interfere with any state initiative, which very specifically refers in some ways to medical marijuana, but any state initiative. And coming up soon is a vote in the California State House, the Assembly, to legalize marijuana. It's introduced by Tom Amiano. And it's SB 390, and it actually might have the votes to pass. It requires a $50 an ounce tax on each ounce of marijuana sold. They estimate that the price will plummet to $50 an ounce retail and $50 an ounce tax, making it an ounce of California weed $100 an ounce. They just released a report on my Facebook today that says the California government's accounting office estimates that in the first year they'll get $1.5 billion from direct taxation alone, and then the estimates are that up to 3 million Americans minimum would visit California for up to 2 to 4 weeks if marijuana were legal. Marijuana tourism would cause California to have the strongest economy in the United States almost overnight as weed heads from Japan and Canada and Europe and the rest of the United States descend on Humboldt County and smoke up every bit of weed that grows in that place. They have a $22 billion deficit this year alone. Arnold Schwarzenegger, the governor who smoked so much weed. I mean, in the movie Pumping Iron, the guy is wazooed out of his gourd. He's smoking a big, huge gagger, and he's laughing his head off in the movie Pumping Iron. Well, he's somewhat been a hypocrite, but he promised finally that if the people in the year 2010, because if they don't pass that law this fall, there's going to be a ballot initiative in California while I'm in jail. So let's do all we can to help that. But in 2010, at the very latest, there's going to be an initiative on the ballot where the people of California are going to vote to legalize marijuana. I assure you, they are going to vote to legalize it. And Governor Schwarzenegger said he would have authorized it. He will not stand in the way of the people or their representatives legalizing marijuana. So I truly believe that California will create history as being the first jurisdiction on earth in this century to legalize marijuana for adults. And I would love it to have been Canada. Because I'll tell you what's going to happen. If California legalizes marijuana first, this country will sink into a depression. Because in British Columbia alone, we produce $7 billion of marijuana every year. Canada produces $14 billion of marijuana. If it goes down to $100 an ounce in the United States and people are legally allowed to grow it there, we will lose all our expertise, all our market advantages. BC Bud will just be a memory. No one will be buying it. We'll be importing from the United States. Can you imagine something so humiliating that when they have legal marijuana, we'll actually be importing our weed from California because it will be cheaper, and because it'll be legally grown, it'll be better. I mean, that's just terrible. Because here's the thing, marijuana is the greatest business you could ever have for Canada. First of all, it all grows here. Almost everything I talked to you about earlier that kills people, we import that. We import death. We import guns that aren't made here. We import cars that aren't made here. We import pharmaceuticals that aren't made here. We even have clothes. Every single store's got cotton clothes. We don't grow 1 gram of cotton in Canada. We grow hemp, we grow weed, and that's what Canada's all about, because we're the biggest consumers of marijuana in the industrialized world. Only 5 places on earth smoke and consume more pot than us. And guess what? That's New Guinea, the Solomon Islands, Ghana, and 2 other places I can't even think of. And what I want to know is, how the hell did they call those people on the phone in New Guinea? Who's answering the phone in New Guinea saying, yeah, I'm smoking lots of weed? I mean, I'm amazed that 16% of Canadians answer the phone and some stranger says, are you smoking weed? And they go, yeah, I am. Because I know if I was looking around and I turned around and I had 100 plants there, I'd be saying, not a fucking chance. I'm never smoking that stuff. So there's be people lying on there. And so I figure 16%, the United Nations says that's the biggest consumption in the world. 1 in 6 Canadians are potheads, said the United Nations. And they told the Americans, you got to do something about this. Your own neighbors are just drowning in weed. Smoking lots of weed. What are you going to do about that, America? So, next question.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have.
Oh, really? What? What time is it?
22:09. And we'd like to make sure that you have some time and everyone has some time for a meet and greet with you.
Yeah,
personally.
All right. Well, thanks very much, everyone. It's been awesome.
Thank you.
I'm in, just to let you know, I'm in Barrie tomorrow. I'm in Barrie tomorrow at Liquid Chrome, and so I'll be talking in Liquid Chrome tomorrow and then chilling with Ice Cube at the Rocks in Barrie. I don't know how they get guys like Ice Cube to go to Barrie. And then on Saturday, I'm leading a protest against Bill C-15 in Orangeville at the park by Town Hall. There's a park by City Hall in Orangeville. And then I'm speaking on Parliament Hill from 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock on Sunday in Ottawa. And then we continue on. Tell all your friends in Halifax, St. John's, Newfoundland, Quebec City, Montreal. I'm going to be there. And I'm coming back to Ontario and the West. And we're going to keep touring the country till August. And then when I get taken away, I expect you to take your marching orders seriously and go and fuck shit up and do something good for the movement. Thank you.
Got light.